of Famer. We'll ask NBC Sports Boston's Trenni Casey if the pick will be enough to return the losing Pats to their former glory. It's all ahead on Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. President-elect Trump's nominee to be Defense Secretary, Pete Hegseth, is appearing before the Senate Armed Services Committee for his confirmation hearing. Hegseth began his opening statement last hour, but was soon interrupted by the first of at least 3 protesters. The protesters have been escorted out of the confirmation hearing. NPR's Tom Bowman reports Hegseth says he plans to restore the warrior ethos to the Pentagon.
Hegseth is a National Guard combat veteran and a former Fox News host. In his opening statement, he takes on his lack of experience for the job, saying his biography is not like other defense secretaries who have come from the top ranks of politics, industry, and the military. Hegseth says it's time to place someone with, quote, dust on his boots at the helm of the Defense Department. Calling himself a change agent, Hegseth has complained about what he calls a woke military that is based on quotas and not merit, and he has opposed women in ground combat jobs, something that's been allowed for 9 years. Hegseth says he will make sure warriors are fully qualified on their weapons and insists that generals and admirals are chosen on merit. Tom Bowman, NPR News.
Forecasters have issued their most serious warnings for wind in the Los Angeles area today. This could make uncontained wildfires worse. The Palisades fire burning west of L.A. is now 17% contained. The Eaton fire in the Pasadena-Altadena area is more than a third contained. President Biden is urging Congress to quickly approve federal disaster aid, but House Speaker Mike Johnson claims, without offering evidence, California officials mishandled the situation. He wants to put limits on the assistance.
I think there should probably be conditions on that aid. That's my personal view. We'll see what the consensus is. I haven't had a chance to socialize that with any of the members over the weekend because we've all been very busy, but it'll be part of the discussion.
Democratic lawmakers say any disaster response for any part of the country should not be linked with political conditions. The Justice Department has released its report on Donald Trump's efforts to overturn the results of the 2020 election. As NPR's Kristen Wright reports, it does not include a second part of Special Counsel Jack Smith's investigation.
The separate, unreleased volume of Smith's report focuses on Trump's handling of classified documents after leaving the White House. Prosecutors charge the former president with keeping the documents at his Mar-a-Lago resort and refusing to return them to the government. Florida District Judge Aileen Cannon ordered the Justice Department to hold off on releasing that part of Smith's report for now. Trump's 2 former co-defendants in the classified documents case are asking the court to block its release because of their ongoing litigation. After Trump was reelected in November, the Justice Department dropped the cases against him, citing long-standing department policy prohibiting federal prosecutions of sitting presidents. Kristen Wright, NPR News, Washington.
On Wall Street, the Dow's up about 55 points. It's NPR.
Good morning. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. Massachusetts Attorney General Andrea Campbell has filed a lawsuit in Suffolk Superior Court against some of the top insulin makers, as well as some pharmacy benefits managers, for what she calls unfair and deceptive insulin pricing schemes. Campbell alleges that the pharmacy benefits managers like OptumRx, Express Scripts, and CVS Caremark worked in conjunction or coordination with the insulin manufacturers, Eli Lilly, Sanofi, and Novo Nordisk, to distort the market for diabetic treatments to their benefit at the expense of Massachusetts residents living with diabetes. Campbell says in the last decade alone, the manufacturers have increased the prices of their insulin up to 1,000%. And she says the lawsuit seeks to hold the companies accountable for their greed while protecting consumers from exorbitant health care costs. And just a program note, A.G. Campbell will be on with Jim and Marjorie at Boston Public Radio today, live from the Boston Public Library. Boston Mayor Michelle Wu has announced this morning that she and her husband Connor have given birth to their third child, a baby girl named Mira. Was born around 2 p.m. yesterday, 8 pounds 4 ounces. Word from the hospital is that Mayor Wu and Mira are said to be doing very well. Today is also Mayor Wu's birthday. What a birthday present. I was born on my parents' wedding anniversary. 30 degrees in Boston right now, sunny, low 30s today, clear mid-20s overnight, mostly sunny, low 30s tomorrow. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Eric and Wendy Schmidt, through the Schmidt Family Foundation, working toward a healthy, resilient, secure world for all. On the web at theschmidt.org. This is NPR.
Hey, it's Jim Browdy. I am Marjorie Egan. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. At 1 o'clock, Attorney General Andrea Campbell is here for another edition of Ask the Attorney General. She's going to take our questions and yours. And congratulations to Mayor Wu, the first mayor in America to give birth while she's been in
America?
office. I think so, yeah.
Really?
Well, at least in Boston's history. I believe it might be. I think it might be. Who's another mayor who's given birth while she's in office?
Oh, I know.
I don't think there's been one in a big city like this. But in any case, we should check that out. But it's definitely in Boston. And 8 pounds, 4 ounces. That is a formidable little baby girl.
Mira Wu Powarski, congratulations to the whole family. It's really great. So we're all waking up this morning to the release, as you just heard, of Special Counsel Jack Smith's report on Trump's efforts to overthrow the government of the United States of America. Let me repeat that. To overthrow the government of the United States of America. That's what he was attempting to do, the duly elected government. Finding that the Justice Department had ample evidence to convict him, the only thing keeping him safe from conviction is the fact that he won the election in 2024. Meanwhile, Trump's pick for defense secretary, Pete Hegseth, is testifying as we speak, is the first of his nominees to face his Senate nomination hearing. In the event you forgot about his background, he's a heavy-drinking former Fox host, National Guard veteran with a Christian nationalist background, with a deficit of management experience, a surplus of sexual misconduct experience, and of course, he wants to return the Confederate general names to military bases. Trump, already a convicted felon with his own sexual assault findings, and now a 137-page Justice Department report outlining the conspiracy, again, to overthrow the government of the United States, takes office in 6 days. By the way, I know what you're saying. We knew all this, except some details. We knew it, too. But with 6 days to go, Marjorie and I thought it might be useful to step back for a second. Just step back from the rush of the news flow every day and talk about what Jack Smith confirmed for us last night, that he had evidence to convict the soon-to-be next president for an attempt to overthrow the government of the United States, and that the first hearing is on this guy, Hegseth, who apparently a lot of Republicans who had questions about him have been intimidated into saying they think he'll be a fine choice. So we just want your reflections with 6 days to go on both these things. 877-301-8970.
Well, I am, needless to say, a big fan of Mr. Hegseth. You know, I think that in these days, Jim, where everybody's backing away from DEI, we don't want to hire any people of color. We don't want to hire any women. We don't want any special categories. But we do, this white guy can get away with being, as you said before, a serial cheater, you know, thrice married. He calls himself a family man, nonetheless.
Yeah, many families. How many people has he had? Does he have like 11 kids or something?
I think he has 7 kids. He's been married 3 times. His own mother, he had to traipse her up.
This is the best story of them all.
He had to drag her around the Capitol because she wrote a letter just a mere, in 2018, it wasn't long ago, when he was calling the mother of his children, I'm not sure if that's in marriage number 1 or marriage number 2, he was calling her unstable, I guess, to gain points in the divorce. And his own mother said what a bum he was. She said, I have no respect for any man that belittles, lies, cheats, sleeps around, uses women for their own power and ego. And here he is up there.
No. Next line is a key line. You are that man, she writes to him.
That's
you
right.
are that man.
She said she didn't really mean it. You know,
No.
that's what she said. But you say to yourself, you know, in this day when we're all so concerned about DEI, this was the best white man we could really find for this job, Jim. And do you think a black man or a Latino man or a woman could have done one of the multiple things
it's a wonderful point. Not a chance.
Has done. So I tell you, he's going to run. He's found the Lord, and now he's going to stop drinking if he gets the job, Jim. And as your buddy Robert Reich pointed out, you know, we all know people with drinking problems, and we all know what they say. I could stop any time.
Which is what he has said. He will not drink if he's confirmed. By the way,
what he said.
thank you, I think, Nicole, the mayor of San Bernardino in Stamford, had kids while I don't really care.
Okay,
had
thank
kids
you.
while they were serving as mayor. 877-301-8970. I fear that people are listening and saying, yeah. Again, the language that Jack Smith uses. There was an effort to overturn the results of the election. Overturn the results of an election is a euphemism.
Yep.
He was attempted to overthrow the duly elected government of the United States of America. He attempted. And by the way, in this report, there's not a lot of new stuff. One of the things that's most incredible, did you read the part where Smith is saying why their job was so hard and why they had so much trouble with witnesses? They interviewed 250.
They had to go to extensive lengths to protect the witnesses because they were afraid for their lives. I mean, he talked about that. He took Mr. Trump to task for consistently encouraging, quote, violence against his perceived opponents, unquote. And that's a big deal. They interviewed something like 250 people and obtained grand jury testimony from more than 55 witnesses. He doesn't go into detail. I wish he had about which of those witnesses were threatened and what they were threatened about. But that's one of the things that delayed the investigation. But
Can I read Art from West Bridgewater's great text? My reflection, he texts, that you're going to be doing the same topic 4 years from now when Trump starts his third term.
Well,
which
we probably will.
Well,
If he refused to leave once, he'll refuse to leave again. By then, he'll be, how old would he be?
We didn't
by then?
refuse to
He'll
leave
be
last
80.
time.
Well,
he just didn't participate in the peaceful transition of power.
Well, he eventually refused to leave, Jim. It took a long time for him
Marjorie,
to come to the conclusion he was going to leave.
If I had said to you a bunch of years ago, there's going to be a guy who was elected to the presidency who is a felon, who attempted to overthrow the government that he chooses to run, and one of his first acts is to nominate a guy for to lead a almost $1 trillion, it's $800 billion agency, the Defense Department, who is a serial sexual abuser of alcohol, pro-Confederate general names. Mother thinks he's a louse, at least. You'd say
Remember
not a
the
chance.
parties? Remember the parties? They had to carry him out. Carry him back to his room. And as we said at the time, we found that out. How many of us, have been carried back to our room, Jim? I don't know. Were you ever carried back to your room?
I wouldn't know. Who would remember? 877.
Or should you be
By the
able
way,
to get-
I'm not. If I have been, I don't believe
Okay.
I have. I don't believe I was nominated at any time to be
you might have
Secretary
been
of
carried
Defense.
back to your room when you were 18 or maybe 22 or maybe 25. We forgot to say that he ran two corporations before, if you could call them. They were little companies, basically, had to do with veteran stuff. What happened to those companies?
Horrible outcomes.
Ran him into the ground.
Financial mismanagement. And by the way, he's been accused of that by very conservative Republicans, not by some left wing. By the way, we have a little sound from Hegseth in the beginning of the hearing this morning, responding to a question about allegations about sexual assault, inappropriate workplace behavior, alcohol abuse, financial mismanagement. And when you listen to this, Marjorie, tell me who it sounds exactly like. Here it is.
From the beginning, there was a coordinated smear campaign orchestrated in the media against us. That was clear from moment one. And what we knew is that it wasn't about me. Most of it was about President Donald Trump, who's had to endure the very same thing for much longer amounts of time. And he endured it in incredibly strong ways.
By the way, it was about you, for whatever it's worth. But who does that sound exactly like? Except he wasn't crying and screaming.
Who?
Kavanaugh.
Oh, Kavanaugh.
And by the way, remember the line then, which is the same thing
Kavanaugh.
today? Audience of one, testifying for Donald Trump.
Kavanaugh was small potatoes. I mean, we're talking about a full spectrum of offenses here, Mr. Hegseth. By the way,
That's a fair point.
as I said before, he has found the Lord. And as he wrote in American Crusade, people who have found the Lord, this is how they talk. What they want to do after they found the Lord is mock, humiliate, intimidate, and crush our leftist opponents. Attack them first, is what he says in his book. As a committed Christian, I guess he forgot the love one another part.
Okay, 877-301-8970. We're asking you just to reflect with 6 days to go till the inauguration. I can't wait. Billy Ray Cyrus is going to be performing the night before. Did you see who is showing up? I'm being facetious. At the concert, the Village People. The night before.
Well, it's interesting because we had a story a couple of weeks ago from the guy who wrote the song of the YMCA saying it had nothing to do with gay stuff because it's kind of been a gay anthem for all these years. So I don't know what to make of this. A few weeks before the inauguration, he announces this isn't a gay song, and now they're going to perform at the inauguration. Is there something going on there?
How the hell do I know something's going on?
I don't know.
Village people aren't talking to me that regularly. I mean, it's not like they
I mean, was
text
that
me,
a preemptive announcement about the YMCA?
I don't know. Watch Sunday night. You'll find out.
Okay.
Let's go to Mike in Jamaica Plain. You're first on Boston Public Radio. Thanks for the call. Hi.
Hello, yes. I'm a long-time listener, first-time caller.
We thank you for both.
Thank you so much. Yes, I really just have one major sentiment point, which is I heard Michelle Martin touch upon this morning with Senator Ron Wyden, which is no more billionaires. It's really simple. I think all the Democrats need to be saying this. If, for example, if you make over $25 million a year, you tax 75%. That pays for our, our health care, dental. It'll subsidize.
We're losing you. But it's Mike, your point. We should just be taxing billionaires at a higher rate. Is that where you're going about this?
Yes. For example, Ron Wyden today was saying we need chutzpah. The problem is everybody thinks they have chutzpah. It's like everybody considers themselves to be a realist.
Well, by the way, the place you're not going to find a lot of chutzpah, it seems to me, Mike, and we got to let you go only because the connection is so bad, is in the Democratic Party. We're going to talk to John King a little bit later in the 12:30 about the Democrats signing on to this, I think, seriously overreaching immigration, quote, reform bill, because they want to show that they're, quote, on the side of immigration reform, even though, as you said, I think yesterday, it is a horrible assault on due process.
Well, it detains and imprisons people who are just accused of a crime if they're here in the country.
And if the charges
illegally.
are dropped, they remain in detention.
And you know what else? There's no exemption for minors.
Yeah.
So that means if you're mad at your neighbor or you don't like your neighbor because he just came here from another country or something, you could just accuse them of doing something like shoplifting, and they could be separated from their family and detained with absolutely no due process.
Can I do something? Again, I always say we take calls in order. I want to make an exception. If anybody in the audience has ever had their mother write them an email saying, I have no respect for any man that belittles, lies, cheats, sleeps around, and uses women for his own power and ego, you are that man. If you've ever received, obviously not those exact words, if you've received an email like that from your mother, tell the call screener, whoever's answering the calls today, and he or she will put you up to the top of the list. Ellen in a car, you're next on Boston Public Radio. Welcome.
Hi. I think one of the things that really kind of stuck out to me that you're talking about is the idea that people are terrified, and you're seeing it everywhere, and this is trickling down. You see the people in, right now, South Carolina, they're not conceding the governorship or a judgeship, and the people who are supporting that feel intimidated to do so. And when you look at a lot of, the mainstream media, they're being intimidated by money and, licensing and things like that. This is like not a good situation going on. And he was 100% guilty of inciting violence to get his way.
I agree. But there's a corollary to this about how it's trickling down. You use your phrase there, Ellen just hung up. There's a great piece in the Washington Post about, the title is The Meh-ification, meaning meh about January 6th. Yeah. That independents in particular, obviously, who determine elections, are a lot less convinced that January 6th was a really horrible kind of thing. As time passes, the Trump message, and as the caller said, with the intimidation of the media in places like the Washington Post and the LA Times, that's what you get.
Well, we should point out that Jack Smith in his report had all these footnotes talking about the trauma experienced by the Capitol Police.
I'm so glad you brought that up.
They were talking about feeling shell-shocked. They were talking about being unable to move. And he talked about one officer described the effort to keep rioters from getting to congressional staff members after the cops themselves had been beaten badly because they thought that the Congress people maybe wouldn't be, especially some of them are elderly, might not be able to withstand the beating like they could. But that was a whole section of his report, is really the attacks on the Capitol Police and the Washington, D.C. police who came to help the Capitol Police.
So here are a couple of anonymous texts. Day 50 of reminding you guys that Kamala got absolutely decimated by Trump. Well, actually,
Well,
he won
yeah, the person points
resoundingly.
out 49.9
No, I don't think that
votes to
person-
Trump and versus 48.4
Yeah, I
to
think that
Harris.
may be our note.
I don't know if that's decimated.
And he won 7
won.
out of 7
He
swing
won.
states. Another anonymous, Jesus, give it up, both of you. The people have spoken. You're a broken record. We are a broken record, and the people have spoken, but it doesn't undo the fact that the person they spoke in favor of is a felon who attempted to overthrow our government. And obviously a plurality of people are fine with that. We are not. 877-301-8970.
You know, just because the people have spoken doesn't mean that every person has to agree with what the people
Well, that's what they're saying.
concluded.
They seem to be saying.
Okay. Let's go to Ellen in Westport. Hi, Ellen.
Hello, Ellen.
Hi, Happy New Year to both of you.
And to you.
I just want to say that I am just like totally so angry right now that if I could get a passport ready and go anywhere, that I love my country. But, you know, Jim and Marjorie, I listened to everything you said last year and educated me on what proper democracy is and what good politics are. And I cannot believe we have a person going into the presidency with his record and his attitude and what he said all over the place. He doesn't take this job seriously. He's just like over the top, and I am not scared. I am just like sad and angry about this.
Ellen, thanks for your call. We really appreciate your thoughts. 877-301-8970.
Where's Jody Ernst from? Is she from
Iowa.
Iowa, that's what I thought. She's a senator who's a survivor of sexual assault.
Military
And
veteran.
Needless to say, she was very hostile toward Pete Hegseth in the beginning, and then she was threatened with a primary, which is what Elon Musk is doing. He's loaded, obviously. He could fund those kind of primaries, and we'll see what happens, but the word is she's backed down on her opposition. So you think that even someone who is a survivor of sexual assault would be willing to
Who's been in the military?
Yeah, would be willing to support someone who's I think pretty convincingly as reported a sexual assaulter.
By the way, we don't know yet what her vote's going to be. We do know that she went from deeply concerned to we had a very good meeting when Hegseth came to her office to have that conversation. 877-301-8970 is the number. You know what the other thing? I know this is, speaking of that texter that said you're a broken record. Let me be a broken record again. The reason why Jack Smith had to resign from the Justice Department 2 days ago and release this report, whatever it was, at 1 or 2 a.m., is because the Attorney General of the United States moved with such a lack of urgency.
That's right.
Or otherwise, there would have been a trial in Washington, and just like he was convicted in New York City, the evidence seems to suggest he likely would have been convicted for this attempt to overthrow the government, and maybe there would have been a different outcome come November. But Merrick Garland, I think, did a gross disservice to the American people by moving like a snail in this process, so the clock ran out.
Let's not let the Supreme Court off the hook that was asked
You're right.
by Jack
You're totally
Smith
right.
early on to
You're right.
decide. Was it December they asked? He
I
asked
think
them
so.
to decide about immunity issues involving the president, and they dragged their feet and dragged their feet and dragged their feet. When did that come out? The end of June? Or
They had a
beginning of
TikTok
July?
hearing in about 3 minutes after the appeal
so
was filed.
they dragged their feet too, and they're poised to do a lot of bad things. The Supreme Court. We'll talk about that later in terms of your health care. Beth in Boston, thank you for calling.
Hello, Beth.
Hi.
Hi.
I just wanted to piggyback on something a previous caller said, and I find it really disturbing that Elon Musk named some of the female firefighters in the Los Angeles fires and named them on X and gave their phone numbers and everything because he thought they were incompetent.
Right.
That's terrifying to people. That's just terrifying to people. This is real. And these are people just trying to live their lives, and they're going to be attacked.
Well, you know, he's a
Look at Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss when their names were identified by Giuliani and Trump.
Yep.
Lives
2 election
totally
workers
destroyed
in Georgia. Couldn't come out of the house, couldn't go home and live in their house and all that kind of stuff. But Beth, you know, as we know, we're on an anti-DEI crusade, anti-kind of women crusade, anti-people of color crusade, or LGBTQ people. So we're left with this white guy who is about to become the Secretary of Defense, because I think he will become the Secretary of Defense. I hope I'm wrong.
You know what he said?
I think he will. He's a warrior, Jim. He is a warrior.
Beth, thanks for the call. You know what's
And
interesting?
he is, in fairness. He has a lot of
Yeah, he
medals
does.
from his service in Iraq and Afghanistan, so he's obviously a courageous guy in war,
Which has absolutely nothing to do with leading an $800 billion defense department.
And he's also kind of soft on war criminals, too, as we saw with the Gallagher case.
You know what's interesting? That's one of the reasons Trump took a liking to him, by the way. He said he would stop drinking immediately,
right?
Which you mentioned before. He did not say he would stop sexually assaulting people, which obviously means that he is not able to make that commitment.
I think the thing you might say, frankly, is I'll stop drinking right now. You know, I'm not going to wait till I get the job. So you're going to have a few martinis between now and the time you get the job. Is that his plan, or kind of being one of the people that's going to give up booze during Lent? You're going to wait to Mardi Gras to give up Lent. I mean, the guy is obviously an extremely troubled guy. I mean, he's written this bizarre book, American Crusade, which is pretty scary, about how people that are left of center, that would be, I certainly am left of center on a lot of issues, that we hate America and we hate the Constitution. That's what he thinks of people like anybody who I guess is a Democrat. They hate America and they hate the Constitution. That's what he wrote in his book.
Before we take a break, can I ask you a question?
What?
I should have asked you this before, and I apologize.
Yep.
I'm sure the listeners are disappointed I didn't. You have a son, is that correct?
I do.
Have you ever written him an email that said, I have no respect for any man that belittles, lies, cheats, sleeps around, uses women for his own power and ego? You are that man. Have you ever written Daniel that kind of email?
No,
You've not. Okay, just wanted to check.
I have not.
I
have not. I hope I never have to get to that point, Jim. I won't have to get to that point.
No, I'm sure you will. He's a wonderful young man.
I have a wonderful son. Okay.
He's a good guy.
You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Are you all concerned at all that the guy that we've just elected to become the President of the United States is somebody who tried to overthrow the government he's about to run?
We're not.
And that the guy is about to run the Defense Department is kind of a fan of sending military troops out to handle domestic situations in the cities and countrysides of America. 877-301-8970.
As his presidential term comes to an end, President Biden speaks to the nation from the Oval Office for the last time.
I want to lay out what we've done, the opportunities we've created for America, and those opportunities going forward.
From the legacy he leaves behind to the challenges ahead.
This is what we're heading into. And over the next administration, that's what we're handing it to.
It's Biden's farewell address. Listen tomorrow night at 8 here on GBH 89.7 or online at gbhnews.org.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And Celebrity Series of Boston, presenting Jad Abumrad's How to Talk to a Human, live at Sanders Theater on Friday, January 31st. In his new show, the Radiolab creator explores the art of human connection. CelebritySeries.org. And Safety Insurance, offering a variety of home insurance products to cover your home's increased value. You can ask an independent agent about safety insurance. Safety Insurance. We'll help you manage life's storms.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marge Regan. We're live at the library. Streaming youtube.com/GBH News. At 1 o'clock today, Attorney General Andrea Campbell joins us in person for an hour of Ask the AG. And as Marjorie said, you can call, you can text, or you just come to the library and ask her a question directly from the mic. We were reflecting on two things that are not really news as such, but was 6 days ago we thought was important. One, the testimony of the first nominee to the cabinet of Trump's nominees, Pete Hegseth, the man who is nominated to be the head of the Defense Department, who's got a sexual abuse problem, a drinking problem, a management incompetence problem, a financial mismanagement problem. And by the way, I want to be clear, he not only is okay with military bases named after Confederate generals.
Oh, that's right.
He wants to restore the
them.
names of
Yep.
Confederate generals to those bases where their names have been removed. And Jack Smith's report came out in the middle of the night, 1 or 2 a.m. Not much new in there, except once again reaffirming he believes, as a pretty competent prosecutor, that Donald Trump would have been convicted of attempting to overthrow the government of the United States, the same government he's going to be running as of next Monday. And we want to know your reaction to both.
You know, in the olden days, I think it was, who was it? Was it nominated John Tower to be the Secretary of Defense?
I can't remember.
Was it H.W. Bush?
I don't remember.
Well, in the olden days, if there were allegations of womanizing and drinking, you didn't get the job. Those were the olden days. That was then. This is now.
8-7. Well, I mean, some of the other, not drinking, obviously, because Donald Trump does not drink. I mean, you have a guy who's been found liable for sexual abuse, nominating a guy who's credibly accused of sexual abuse. So, I mean, it's not surprising.
One of our texters says swing voters wanted cheaper eggs, so they moved on.
Well, okay, fine. But I hope people realize that Donald Trump, in every interview he's done in the last week, has moved away, said it's going to be really hard to bring down grocery prices. He's backing away from this notion that he's going to snap his finger, end the war in Ukraine, bring down egg prices, et cetera, et cetera. Let's go to Paul in Boston. Hi.
Hi, good morning.
How are you?
I'm okay. Not really, but
yeah.
I'm trying.
Good.
I just had a quick comment to Marjorie. About 5 years ago, you said on the radio something that really nailed it for me. I have a radio on my kitchen table, and when I would pour my coffee, I would stare at that radio, and before I turn it on, I'd be afraid to, and say, what did he do last night?
Oh, that's a good point. You're talking about Trump.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. I think that's what's going to happen again. People are going to be worried. Remember in the first term, you wake up in the morning, as you just said, Paul, turn on your radio or look at your phone and think what happened overnight. I think that's going to happen again, yeah. But, you know...
Paul, thanks.
You know what's interesting, too, about... I mean, we know there have been terrible tragedies. I mean, look what happened in getting out of Afghanistan. That was horrible. That hurt Joe Biden a lot, and there was probably a lot of poor planning there. But what's kind of sad about this is when you think of institutions people still admire in the United States, the military is like right at the top of the list. And we hope that he doesn't mess this up. He did think, warrior that he is, that we shouldn't have any women in these combat positions. He's backtracked.
He's flipped on that, yeah.
He's flipped on that. But he's... you just hope he doesn't do any lasting harm should he be
How would he not? You know, one of the things was interesting is that Democratic Senator from Connecticut, Blumenthal, commented last night. And by the way, has some problems here because he lied about his military
Vietnam,
record.
Wasn't it?
He did, and but he said something when he was asked about the. I think the question was around the sexual abuse allegations, the alcohol abuse. He said he went on to say that's not the only issue. He is the least competent person nominated to run a major department in recent American history. And I know you don't like to hear this if you're a supporter of Donald Trump, which means you're a supporter of everything he does, it appears. He has no resume, even if he wasn't a sexual abuser and an alcohol abuser and a pro-Confederate general and trashed by his mother. The only relevant experience he has is running tiny little organizations where fellow conservative Republicans have said he did financial mismanagement and he was not up to the job with whatever it was, a 6 or 7 person staff.
Yeah, it was very
this
tiny.
is an almost $1 trillion operation.
I think that the Trump people will argue that what Trump wants is a disruptor, and they'll have somebody else actually doing the nuts and bolts. But that's my question: disrupt what? I mean, we have our crises, obviously, like Afghanistan and Iraq and all those things. But I don't think it was because of the poor quality of the United States military. I think it was probably wars we never should have gotten involved in the first place. That wasn't about the quality of the soldiers that were fighting those wars, right?
Think he's ever had a beer with Brett Kavanaugh, or what do you think? Or not? Oh, he won't be once he's
Well,
confirmed.
That's another thing. We have a thing about giving sexual predators jobs. You know what I mean? I mean, Brett Kavanaugh was a long time ago, was in high school. Let's hope it was not a pattern for him, although there were other women that did claim it was a pattern for him, but it was a long time ago. Let's hope he's cleaned up his act. But this guy, his mother's saying these things. This is 2018.
Yeah.
It wasn't like this was back when he was in high school. Let's go to
She said she was talking about another son. That she didn't have that other son, but had she?
Am I wrong? Did he bring her up to Capitol Hill?
He brought her up to Capitol Hill.
I mean, really, you're a big warrior, big tough guy. You're going to bring Mom around.
Well, how about bringing his wife? When he's having his initial meetings,
they're holding hands.
They're
all
holding
the time.
hands, walking the halls.
Yep.
My wife is joining me while I respond to questions about sexually abusing. And by the way, didn't he have a bunch of these kids while he was married with the next wife who wasn't the wife yet?
I think he was the wife to be was pregnant when he was still married to the previous wife. And,
well, I
but
mean,
I'm not
you know
sure
what that
which
proves?
Wife
That proves that he's a good planner, which may be valuable for running the defense. We only have time for one more. What is it?
Okay, Rama from Marlborough. Thank you for calling.
Hello, Rama.
Yeah. You two are having so much fun. You're priceless. I forgot what I wanted to say.
We forgot what we wanted to say too, so it's okay. What's up?
But you asked if we're worried. I'm worried that I'm not worried.
Why are you not worried?
Because I think if the Hegseth and other these knuckleheads get in, and if Trump and his cronies do the things they're threatening to do, that I and our comrades may need to take up arms. I don't even own a gun, but am I going to have to defend my country here on the shore, in the United States of America? And others, are we going to have to defend our country? What are we going to have to do?
Rama, I wouldn't worry about that. I would say the American people who see Donald Trump as a threat are basically even giving up tweeting about it these days. There is no, in my opinion, there is virtually no, we're going to talk to Kyle Rose from the Civil Liberties Union. Maybe that's an exception. There's no blowback. People essentially, in my opinion, at least so far, have given up. Marjorie believes, sort of like you, once these policies start to become real, there'll be a reaction. I am not convinced
I'm not
that.
sure,
I
I'm
thought
not
you've
sure
been
of
saying
that at all. No, because I think people will not believe it. They'll think it's fake news. They'll think that Trump is brilliant at repeating the lies so often that people believe it. I mean, as you said before, a lot of people think January 6th wasn't a big deal. What's the percentage of Republicans that think that the race was actually stolen in 2020?
70%, I think.
So, I mean, he's you can't beat the guy at getting people to believe things that aren't true. But anyway.
We have to take a break.
We're taking a break. We're moving on.
By the way, I would say, I mentioned that line about January 6th from the Washington Post, that meh-ification. I think the response, even though the callers seem to be up in arms, I get the sense that a lot of our audience is into that. I mean, he's horrible, but people elected him, and I don't really get the sense of alarm that I think.
We're going to talk about this later when Carol Rose is here, but you look at polls, most Americans do not want to see these people pardoned if they did anything at all violent.
2/3 don't.
Yeah, and so that, I think, we don't like people who beat up cops. And we shouldn't like people who beat up cops.
Yeah,
right?
Let's talk to me in a week and see how people are reacting.
All right, coming up after a quick break, we're going to change the subject. We're going to talk with NBC Sports Boston Trenni Casey. Patriots have a new coach, and this is a great little story, how a sideline book reading by an Eagle player, football player, turned the book he was reading from 500,000 plus on Amazon to #1. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
So many African migrants bound for Europe pass through the Moroccan town of Agadir that the economy now depends on them.
Migrants feel safe here, he says, because locals are welcoming. Farmers need migrants to work their land, he says, and migrants need the money to pay for a seat on a smuggler's boat.
That's next time on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for GBH comes from you and Brown University pre-college programs, where academically motivated high school students can experience college life, nurture their diverse interests, and make new friends. Applications for summer 2025 open January 15th. precollege.brown.edu. And Furniture Consignment Gallery, helping to power the circular economy for over 20 years. Now accepting high-end luxury furniture consignments in the greater Boston area. Learn more at FurnitureConsignment.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy, Marjorie Egan, live from the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. 1 o'clock in about, whatever that is, 80 minutes. The Attorney General, Andrea Campbell, will be here for an hour of Ask the AG. So if you've got a question, get ready. Joined now by Trenni Casey, anchor and reporter for NBC Sports Boston, and a BPR contributor. Hi, Trenni.
Hello, Trenni Casey. So let's start with a little bit of the Patriots press conference with Patriots owner Robert Kraft announcing the new head coach, Mike Vrabel. First, you'll hear Kraft, and then you'll hear Vrabel.
And most importantly, he had a clear and focused strategy of how to get us back to a championship way that is so important to all of us, but also something that I think our fan base really deserves and expects.
We're going to earn the right to be here every day. We're going to remove entitlement from our football team. We're going to get everything that we've earned from the head coach to the position coaches, all the way down to the players.
Whatever that means.
I don't know what that means either, but good choice for the next head coach.
I think it's a great choice for the next head coach. Honestly, I think had the Crafts not been in the position last year where they had essentially entitled Gerard Mayo to the job before he was ready and put it in his contract, when Mike Vrabel was released from his contract and let go from Tennessee, there was talk last year about whether or not the Patriots would pivot and go back on their promise to Gerard Mayo and instead employ Mike Vrabel because he had success in Tennessee. He's been all over the place. He was an assistant coach at Ohio State. Then he was a linebackers coach for the Houston Texans. He then became the defensive coordinator for the Houston Texans. Then he was the head coach for the Tennessee Titans. He followed a more traditional path where he learned how to coach at all levels. He learned how to be a leader. He learned how to be a coordinator and then a head coach. And now he's learned mistakes. A lot of times guys have even more success in their second go around as a head coach than they do in their first because they learn from their mistakes. And Mike Vrabel, for all intents and purposes, was a really good head coach in Tennessee. In his 6 seasons there, he finished with a winning record. I think 54-45 was his overall record. Last 2 years struggled, which is why he was let go, but they made it to an AFC championship game. He won Coach of the Year in 2021. I mean, this is somebody who I was a little like, do we have to hire another person with Patriots ties? But Mike Vrabel, he has earned it. He was not given this opportunity. He has earned an opportunity to be a head coach again. He was the hottest guy in the market, and the Patriots were just lucky enough, I think, to have a tie to him, that he looks at what they have, especially their quarterback, and says, I might be able to do something with this.
Two things about this. One, correct me if I'm wrong, this statistic is one of the most incredible ever. He played defense. He was a linebacker. Mm-hmm. Occasionally, they used him as sort of a tight end.
Yep.
And I think this statistic is right. In all the years he was with the Patriots, he caught 10 passes. All 10 passes were touchdowns, 2 of them in a Super Bowl. Is that accurate?
I think that is correct.
I mean,
I remember reading it the other day.
Every single pass
I believe 10 out of 10 was a touchdown.
Because it's a trick play, right? Like you make him you bring a defensive guy, you make him an eligible receiver. He lines up in the tight end position, but he's so athletic. And I will say this about Mike Vrabel. So he is a defensive guy. He was drafted by the Pittsburgh Steelers, I believe, in the 4th round. And he was sort of unheralded there. Mm-hmm. He really didn't get a lot of playing time. And then he really made his career with the Patriots under Bill Belichick. But what he did for the last year, and I think this is going to make him an even better head coach, he spent the last year as like a consultant, an advisor to the Cleveland Browns, and he worked a lot on the offensive side of the ball as well. Kevin Stefanski, who's the head coach there, likes defensive guys to get their eyes on the offense, and that I think when you're designing, I just think he understands the entire game. I think he is a well-rounded, great hire.
Well, the only thing that upsets me about this whole deal, I have to say, is there's something, we mentioned this on the air, I think, I don't know with whom, there's something called the Rooney Rule that requires that, I'll give you the shorthand, it's not exactly right, but it's close to it. You're going to hire for a position like this, you must interview 2 candidates of color before you make a decision, so they're at least in the mix. To comply with this rule, the Patriots interviewed 2 guys who don't even coach in football anymore. It's sort of like, find me 2 black guys so I can comply with the rule so I can hire Vrabel on Monday.
It's not kind of like that. That's exactly what they did.
It's really horrible.
And they are nationally. They are taking flack from the national media for this. Yes. Like Mina Kimes has been all over them. Albert Breer has been all over them. Those 2 I know for sure have really called them out. And we were talking about this process last week before they hired Mike Vrabel. And the word almost everybody on our air kept using, including me, was this interview process is a sham. It's a complete sham. You're going to hire Mike Vrabel, and props to Aaron Glenn. So Aaron Glenn is currently the defensive coordinator. He's an African-American guy, defensive coordinator for the Detroit Lions. They asked to interview him only after the Crafts took flack for interviewing Pep Hamilton and Byron Leftwich, two guys who have not coached in the NFL since 2022.
Yeah.
And Aaron Glenn said, no, I don't want to.
Good
Good.
for
You
him.
saw right through it. They weren't
for
going to
him.
hire you. They weren't going to give you a real interview. Ben Johnson, the offensive coordinator, a white guy, he was first asked by the Patriots. He was asked sort of, right out of the chute. And so the process of it is kind of gross. And I do wonder if they're going to get their hand slapped from the league, because this was, listen, Pep Hamilton and Byron Leftwich have not gotten another single interview because they didn't succeed at the jobs that they had earlier, and they haven't worked in the NFL since they left those jobs. Like, they were not in good faith. They were box checkers, and that's not in the spirit of this rule.
I'm glad you think that. So you mentioned Belichick in passing. Here's what I hope happens. Because I'm not a huge fan of Belichick's. Not only because of how demeaning he was to people trying to do their jobs, people like you in the media, but secondly, because I'm in the camp, as you know, who believes it was 90% Brady and 10% Belichick. So he takes the job at UNC.
Yep.
I think his quote was, "I didn't come here to quit."
Mm-hmm.
And now this is speculation that because the Dallas Cowboy job opened up yesterday, he's going to pay the $10 million cancellation fee, leave UNC after 3 weeks, and go to Dallas.
Okay, so when Bill Belichick was hired at the University of North Carolina and the details emerged of his contract, I honestly thought that whoever put it out initially had mistyped, that they had typed 2025 when they meant to write 2026, because Bill Belichick has 2 outs in his contract. If he leaves the University of North Carolina before June 1st of 2025, so that's not even 6 months in, that's like 6 months into his tenure, he has to pay $10 million to leave. If he leaves after June 1st of 2025, he has to pay $1 million. So basically, he said to the University of North Carolina, I'll come coach for you, but if somebody else comes calling, I want like $10 million. I'm sure a lot of you are saying, oh, $10 million. Like, he's not going to pay $10 million to go to the Cowboys. No, he's not, but Jerry Jones will pay the university. That's like $10 to
Wait a second,
Jerry
didn't
Jones.
he make $25 million this year to not coach the Patriots?
Yeah, but still, like, $10 million is like not a small feat,
Okay.
even for like a multimillionaire. But for a billionaire owner, if you really want, Bill Belichick to come coach your football team, you just write the check to the University
So
of North
what's the
Carolina.
betting on this in your world? What are people saying?
So it's kind of torn. People actually think that. So there was some talk that Tom Brady was maybe. So the Las Vegas Raiders also have a head coaching they have an open head coaching spot, and a couple days after they fired Antonio Pierce, they also fired their pretty successful general manager. And people thought it was for one of 2 reasons. One, they were trying to maybe lure Mike Vrabel, who's very close with Tom Brady. Tom Brady is a partial owner of the Vegas Raiders. He's going to have a pretty significant involvement in the hiring of the new head coach. But other people thought he wants Belichick to come. And if Belichick goes there and there's not a GM, then Belichick can once again be the GM head
I
coach
love this
combo.
intrigue.
So there has been, most people think that he's still not going to go to the NFL, that if the NFL really wanted him, they would have hired him last year. But he did do, he kind of went on like a image rehabilitation tour. I will say this, though. Like, while it would be fun and it would obviously give us fodder for an entire year if Bill Belichick came back to the NFL, especially if he came back to the Raiders. So the Raiders play the Patriots in Foxborough next year. So it would be Mike Vrabel, who's beat Belichick, I think, at least twice, against his old, Belichick could come back against his old team in Foxborough against each other, like great theater. But it would be pretty crummy for Bill Belichick he's got a bunch of kids to transfer. You got a guy from UConn who transferred. He's gotten some Holy Cross offensive linemen. You get other kids out of the transfer portal. That you come and you leave another football program and you come to North Carolina because you think you're going to play for North Carolina. And then Bill Belichick says, you know what, peace out. I'm going to coach the Cowboys or the Raiders or something. Like, I just think that's doing those kids. These are kids. Like, that's doing those kids dirty. But, do any of us think Bill Belichick wouldn't do that? I think he probably would, because I think deep down he wants to catch the Down Schuler record. Deep down he wants to show it was
Most
not
coaching
Brady.
victories ever, yeah.
That it was him. That he had just as big a part of that success as Tom Brady.
I think he's already lost that one. I think he has. But already, speaking of Tom Brady, what's the deal with his Fox career as a broadcaster?
I don't know. There's betting lines. You can bet on everything, everybody. There are betting lines on that as well, that people think that he might be one and done. So I've actually listened to him quite a fair number of times, because he's called probably a half a dozen Packers games, including the Packers playoff games. Congratulations to your Eagles, Jim.
Thank you. She's a Packers fan.
A bigger
kid
person
from the
here.
Midwest, yes.
I mean, they play like trash, so you guys deserve to win. I mean, come on, you freaking fumble the opening kickoff. Like, you're not winning that game. I was so mad.
Yeah.
But anyway, I digress. So Brady called it. He's not a great analyst.
Yeah.
He uses a lot of cliches. He's kind of tight. Like, his voice is kind of weird on air. Like, it's really high and sort of like not like if I've not talked to Tom Brady. Like, we're not pals, so I've never like spoken to him in person. But I've heard people who know him well, who played alongside him, who are still friends with him, are like, that's not his voice in real life. And the more power he gets within the Vegas organization, the harder it is for him to be objective when calling games. Now, Fox primarily calls NFC games, but they call more than a handful of AFC games as well. They're the broadcaster this year for the Super Bowl. I wouldn't be surprised if he was like, you know what, I'm going to take a bigger handle. Like, I think ownership is really where it's at for him. I would be shocked if he lasts another year, maybe. But there's no way he's finishing out that 10-year
He's only
contract.
making $37 million a year.
Yeah,
I mean, it's nothing.
It's like
for,
nothing. Just
okay, so here's my favorite story.
I mean,
maybe
after
of the week.
taxes.
Maybe not of the week, maybe of the whole football season. Here's the sound of the Fox broadcasters reacting to Eagles wide receiver A.J. Brown sitting on the sideline reading a book during Sunday's game against Trenni's Green Bay Packers. Here it is.
So A.J. Brown, he's a little frustrated. Obviously, he hasn't seen too many balls today. He's going to read a little passage here.
I haven't seen too many people read books, but I've seen a quarterback eat a hot dog.
By the way, that second announcer was Tom Brady.
Yes.
Okay, so here's the Sports Illustrated fact
Didn't they get
thing.
fined for reading a hot dog? Didn't I read that
I don't
somewhere?
know.
Where they
Listen to
could-
this.
Probably.
The
Yeah.
name of the book by this guy Murphy, Jim Murphy, is Inner Excellence, and then there's a subtitle. Inner Excellence, according to Sports Illustrated, this is before the game, from 523,497th on Amazon's bestsellers list on Sunday to number 1 on Monday because people saw him reading the damn book during the game. Is that a great story? And by the way, the guy says, I always read on the sideline.
Yeah, he said, no,
I
it's
learned
just-
a lot from this. You just haven't covered it.
Well, he said like the cameras just had never caught him. So A.J. Brown's a really great wide
He's
receiver
fabulous.
for the Philadelphia Eagles. And he said, I love this. Rather than getting frustrated and throwing things around, when a game isn't going A.J. Brown's way, apparently he's read this book multiple times. Like, it's something that he keeps with him.
Dog-eared.
Yeah, dog-ears it, and he sits down, and, it's probably pretty hard to, even if you're a good meditator, it's probably somewhat hard to meditate and get in your brain. So he sits down and he reads passages from this book to sort of refocus and recenter himself during the game. And it's this book all about, like, inner excellence and blah, 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 blah. But I am like, so, because I'm an old person, I hate influencers, but this just proves that influencers work, because you idiots out there see a guy reading a book and you're like, I'm going to buy this book. A.J. Brown bought the book. Maybe I'll be like A.J. Brown. So now I get why people use influencers.
It was great. If you didn't see it, the image is great. It's an overhead camera. You see this fabulous athlete sitting on the bench,
paging
and he's
through.
flipping through the damn book as the game is going
I
on.
do think it's funny, like Tom Brady's like, I didn't see many guys reading books, and I was like, ever? Because I could see that being ever.
Well, he's the one. This story is one that mentioned that 3 members of the Seattle Seahawks were fined for eating hot dogs during a preseason game years
Yeah,
ago.
I mean,
who
that's
cares if they're eating hot dogs on the sidelines? Why is that a problem?
I have no idea.
You have no
Like
idea.
the NFL is so. They don't pay their ex-players who have brain trauma, but they fine guys for eating hot dogs. Like that's so peak NFL.
We talked about just on another. After you were on last week, I reread to torture myself that story that we
in the
discussed with
Washington
you
Post? Yeah.
about doing anything they can in the NFL to deny benefits to men whose lives families' brains are destroyed in all likelihood because of the concussive or pre-concussive hits. It is an abomination. But you know what's close? Did you read the Bob Holler story about the URI
Yes, I
softball
did.
coaches?
I
Not
sent it to you
one,
guys, yeah.
not two, but three in a row. Tell people the story there.
And the guy, this
Thomas Bjorn.
Athletic director.
Yes, that keeps hiring these
3 in a
people
row.
with checkered past.
So the backstory on this is that is it Thomas Bjorn? Is that his name?
Thorbjorn.
Thorbjorn is the athletic director at the University of Rhode Island. He has now hired 3 straight softball. Am I right on that?
Yeah, softball.
Yes. Softball coaches, women's softball coaches that have had to have been dismissed and have had allegations and lawsuits brought against them for like abuse, whether it is verbal, making young women play through injuries, concussions. She had something called like a vulnerability circle where she made these young women tell like their deepest, darkest secrets to try and get them to open up. But what really struck me, and this is in the middle of the story, so this the most recent coach is it Melissa Goldstein?
It is Goldstein.
Goldstein, correct.
No, Whitney Goldstein.
Whitney Goldstein, excuse me. Whitney
She's the
Goldstein.
one that wanted them to tell their most horrible experiences, which is weird.
That's the most recent woman who has been dismissed from the job, who had all these complaints levied against her. She had a complaint. Every one of these coaches that he hired had previous complaints levied against them at their previous universities, lawsuits at their previous universities. So it's not as if everything was hunky-dory, like when she was at Worcester Polytech. She was at WPI, and the reason he hired her is at this Division III school, WPI. She has, enormous success. They win all these games. They win these championships. And so they bring her to URI. Their softball program has been struggling, and they bring her in. But he conveniently ignores the fact that she had to settle a lawsuit there as well. And it's the 3rd time in a row. And for some reason, despite all of this guy keeps his job as the athletic director. He makes it difficult on victims to, file complaints. They question parents and athletes who come forward and make them feel like they're the problem. Like, this is the problem with college athletics. It's like you're so tunnel visioned of how do we become successful that you don't care how you get there and how it affects your student athletes. And for the most part, I know we've talked a ton about, NIL on this show. Names, image, likeness, which is what athletes now can make money on their
college
name, image, likeness. College athletes can. This mostly applies to if you're talking female athletes, like the Caitlin Clarks, the Paige Beckers of the world, not a URI softball player, right? So most of these kids are truly student athletes.
I want to say one more thing that really put me over the edge in this excellent story by Bob Holler in the Globe. 7 of Goldstein, the most recent coaches, WPI players or their parents, reach out to the Globe to praise her after learning a story was in the works. This reminds me of another story, which we won't mention. The fact that this did not happen to these 7 women athletes does not mean it didn't happen to the other athletes. And the arrogance of people who are teammates or coworkers to say, I didn't see it, I don't know about it, essentially devaluing the testimony of women who suffered pain and not doing a line saying, I don't know what happened to them. I just know that I didn't experience it.
This is almost a cliche. You see this all the time. Harvey Weinstein, you saw it. You saw it with the guy at Fox, Roger Ailes, where because he sexually assaulted 20 women, the 20 women he didn't assault said, well,
didn't happen to me.
So therefore it didn't happen. It doesn't happen to every single person.
I don't understand what causes someone to say. So just a really quick story. There was never mind. And I knew an NFL player who was convicted of like 3 rapes. He was always nice to me. It's not like I called a paper and was like, but he was always nice to me. I was like, wow, I'm shocked, but what a dirtbag.
That happens with great frequency.
Does
anyway,
indeed.
we're speaking with
Trenni,
Trenni
nice to see you.
Anchor reporter for NBC Sports Boston, BPR contributor. Thank you very much, Trenni. Coming up after the new news, the executive director of the ACLU of Massachusetts, Carol Rose.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Lakshmi Singh. The Senate Armed Services Committee is holding a confirmation hearing this hour for President-elect Trump's nominee for Defense Secretary. Pete Hegseth is trying to overcome allegations that include sexual misconduct and his stance on women in combat. A short time interference by now President-elect Trump NPR's Kerry Johnson reports former special counsel Jack Smith is strongly defending the investigation, even though the case will never go to trial.
The report concludes there was enough evidence for a jury in Washington, D.C. to convict Trump for trying to cling to power after he lost the 2020 election. Prosecutors say Trump engaged in a campaign of pervasive deceit about those election results and that he stood at the center of a criminal conspiracy. Jack Smith says the rule of law matters, and so does setting an example to pursue justice in the face of personal attacks and
condition of anonymity due to the sensitivity of the talks. A spokesperson for the Qatari Prime Minister echoed that same sentiment, saying the two parties have overcome major obstacles in recent days. Even if a deal is reached, it won't be implemented immediately. It will still need approval from the Israeli cabinet and could head to the Israeli Supreme Court. Kat Lonsdorf, NPR News, Tel Aviv.
From Washington, this is NPR News.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. Massachusetts Governor Maura Healey is out with a new plan to boost funding for transportation projects here in Massachusetts. As GBH's Jeremy Siegel reports, she wants to use money from the so-called millionaire's tax to help the MBTA close a major budget gap.
Healey's plan is based on recommendations from a task force she established last year, charged with finding ways to sustainably fund the state's long-term transportation goals. Their solution is to rely on more revenue from Massachusetts' surtax on incomes over $1 million. The governor says that using roughly $857 million generated by the surtax will help the T avoid a looming fiscal cliff and create a path to more stable transportation funding in the years ahead. Advocates say the state should go further, pointing to recently established congestion tolls in New York City. Jeremy Siegel, GBH News, 89.7.
The People's March, which began in 2017 as a protest to Donald Trump's first election to the presidency, is returning to Boston Common on Saturday, January 18th, 2 days before the inauguration. USA Today reports that the two major themes of this year's march will be the right to legal abortion and democracy. The speakers list consists of Democratic politicians, representative of groups supporting LGBTQ plus rights, and an organization advocating for New England's peaceful secession from the United States. 31 degrees outside our studios here in Brighton. I'm Henry Santoro. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Fisher Investments. As a fiduciary, Fisher Investments is obligated to act in their client's best interest. Learn more at FisherInvestments.com. Investing in securities involves the risk of loss. This is NPR.
Mr. Browdy, I am Marjorie Egan. Welcome to hour number 2 of Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. An hour from now, we're going to be joined by the Attorney General of the Commonwealth, Andrea Campbell, who will take our questions and yours. Hello again, Jim.
Hey, before we introduce Carol, should we recognize two noted cookbook authors sitting in the back of the room?
Oh, my goodness.
I don't remember their names, but I know they wrote this fabulous cook.
My goodness.
Oh, that's right. Billy Costa and Jenny Johnson. Let's hear it for them.
Oh.
What's the name of that cookbook again? What is the name of the cookbook? A Taste of Boston. Thank you.
Okay, you have all these great restaurants around the city, and then you have a recipe that goes with every one.
How many of the recipes did you make, by the way?
You guys.
Excuse me. How many did you make?
Well, I didn't make any.
Okay, fine. No, but she would if she hadn't not.
But
okay.
Last night I made a great baked potato, and I followed your advice on making baked potatoes.
I got that from Roger Berkowitz, actually. It wasn't my idea.
Okay, what do you do?
Oil the crap out of the thing.
Yep.
Put a ton of salt.
Yeah.
Like immerse it, like encase it in salt.
Great.
Changes the whole experience. Oh, you're here too. Okay, we're joined now at the library by Carol Rose, Executive Director of the Civil Liberties Union of Massachusetts. Carol, it's nice to see you.
It's great to be here.
How are
Thank you. Well.
Yeah, we're all kind of concerned, but you guys are doing something about it over there at the ACLU. You got this firewall for freedoms thing, and tell us what that's about. What we can do if we're worried about where we're headed here. Firewalls for freedom. Excuse me, I said it wrong.
That's right. So, at the ACLU of Massachusetts and the ACLU nationwide, because there's an office in all 50 states, we've been working for over a year to get ready with scenario planning for, regardless, we don't endorse candidates, but we were ready for if there was a Harris administration, and we're ready if there's a Trump administration. And this Firewalls for Freedom plan that we have is a way for all people to get involved and to get engaged in defending our democracy and in defending our freedom. And there are 3 parts to it. So part number 1 is to keep Massachusetts safe and free by not collaborating beyond what's required by law with
collaborating. I love that word, because that's what we're doing, isn't it?
That's right.
That's familiar from the 30s and 40s,
That
isn't
is
it?
familiar from the 30s and 40s. And so, when federal government agencies come in and try to demand that we collaborate and cooperate with things that go against our values as a Commonwealth, we don't have to voluntarily give over the information about people seeking reproductive health care or people seeking, or immigrants or anybody else. So the first thing we can do is just to say we don't have to collaborate beyond what's required by the law.
Well, can you stop right there? Here is where I am totally confused. We've discussed this with Mayor Wu, discussed it with the governor. What is the law? What requirements of existing law are there for cooperation on local levels or state levels with ICE, with Immigration and Customs Enforcement, if they come, and this Homans guy, who is like a real red meat kind of character, who's leading this mass deportation effort, he says it's going to start on day 1. Under existing law, what does Massachusetts or Boston or any other city and town have to do?
So Massachusetts and the cities and towns can't get in the way of an ICE enforcement action, but they're not required to deploy their local police or our state police to collaborate, to cooperate with them, unless we're responding to things like a warrant or something like that. But we're not required to just turn people over, and it's really important that people recognize that because they're not supposed to do it. And if the governor and the mayors and things like that say we're not going to do that, then the local police are not supposed to do that.
But you said we can't stand in their way, right? Is that what you said a second ago?
Yeah, I mean, we can't.
They come to a school. There was a story in the New York Times about how the New York City schools are preparing for the, hopefully not likelihood, but possibility of them going after kids who are either undocumented themselves or, since Trump doesn't believe that the citizenship provision, if you're born here in the United States, even though it's in the Constitution, is mandated, they go after a kid who comes to a school. What are they entitled to do at that school?
Well, I think at this point, the most important thing is the prevention. So the first thing the school should do is not to collect information about people, about students or their families that they're not required by the law to collect. So if they come and they say, we want to see a list of all the students in your school who might be undocumented, we shouldn't have that information available.
I'm coming for John Doe in particular.
In particular?
Can they do that?
Probably.
They can.
Yeah. I mean, at that point, if they have somebody, you can't stand in the way, but you don't have to collaborate, and they're unlikely to do that because they're not going to have that information.
But if they were to do it, or they come for a family, or they come for an individual, are there enough lawyers out there in your umbrella, and I'm sure you're getting zillions of volunteers.
Oh, we are.
Well, tell us what you're doing.
Yeah, so the most important thing to recognize is that there are so many things that people can do, lawyers, but also non-lawyers. So just since the election, we've had more than 1,000 new volunteers sign up and hundreds of lawyers, and we're doing trainings, and we're signing people up and finding how they can be helpful. But even if they're not lawyers and they're just ordinary people, there are things that we can do in our day-to-day lives just to not collaborate, to get involved in your local school board, to make sure that your town isn't somehow turning people over and being a collaboration on this really authoritarian regime. So that's the first thing, is to sort of keep us safe and free and to live by our values. And there are lots of things we can do. The second is to make sure that people who are seeking health care, at-risk health care, that they're protected. And so we've already here in Massachusetts, our legislature and our Governor Maura Healey have done great things to make sure there's a SHIELD Act to protect patients and providers who are seeking abortion care or gender-affirming care or miscarriage care or IVF care or contraception, all of these things. We want to make sure that people can continue to access health care here in Massachusetts. And again, our state laws are really important firewalls for freedom in that way.
Carol, excuse me, our staff is saying to get the microphone a little bit closer to your mouth.
Got it. Is that better?
Perfect.
I guess so.
Wonderful. Thank you. Yeah. So two things, not collaborating, making sure people can still seek health care here in Massachusetts. And then the third is to really reduce unaccountable surveillance. And the most important thing that the state legislature can do here is to pass what's called the Location Shield Act and other forms of data privacy. You know, if we don't collect data, so right now, data brokers, for profiteers can just can use a check. They don't have to be government, and they can just buy your data location. They can buy your data location from these data brokers who sweep it up and follow and track you on your cell phone. We think that should be outlawed here in Massachusetts. There should be a ban on that. And the only people who are complaining about it are people who are profiting from stealing your privacy and my privacy and everybody else's privacy.
So if they're the only ones complaining about it, why has the legislature not done it?
I think they need to understand the urgency of it. I'm confident that they're going to do it now. I think they didn't see the threat, but I'm hopeful that they do see the threat now. And if they do nothing else, I think passing a comprehensive data privacy bill is going to be important. You know, right after 9/11, it was so interesting because remember when they were going into libraries and trying to find out what books people were reading and to track their reading habits and their searching habits on the internet. And librarians started to say at the end of every day, they would just wipe everything clean from their database. So if agents show up and say, we want to see your database, you don't have to say, I refuse to cooperate. You just have to say, we don't keep that information. So, you know, it costs more money in the digital age to actually get rid of information than to just let it sit around. I mean, how many of us haven't cleaned out our email inboxes for a long time, right? And so if you clean out that information, there's nothing for anybody to collect. And that'll protect people, whether it's in the context of abortion care or gender-affirming care or immigration or journalists or political dissidents. There are a lot of data hygiene things that we can and should be doing at the state level and at the local level.
So if you had to rank in order of priority the things that you think Beacon Hill should be doing to accomplish all three of your firewall goals, what would they be?
I'd say the most important thing is a comprehensive data privacy bill, which could include the Location Shield Act, but also other medical privacy and other kinds of privacy. It's nobody's business, you know, what we're doing in our private lives. It's nobody's business to track us where we go or just what kind of medical care or mental health care or other substance use care, other kinds of things that we're seeking. It's really not the government's business. So if nothing else, I would hope that the Massachusetts legislature would pass a comprehensive data privacy bill.
Well, the example I remember hearing about was people going to Planned Parenthood clinics,
right?
And other people were able to identify that they were there because of their phone.
Well, that's right. And what's so interesting, one of these for-profit data brokers, they profit from our privacy. You know, they just went into 48 states, including Massachusetts, and showed that they could do that. And they were tracking people going to Planned Parenthood and to other, you know, medical facilities. So they know they can do that, and they get a bounty in places like Texas of $10,000 for turning somebody in.
Yeah, how creepy.
It's so creepy. So, I mean, I just think this is a common sense reform for the digital age. It doesn't have to be all political and partisan. It's just the right thing to do, a data hygiene, comprehensive privacy bill, and passing the Location Shield Act. If we did that, that would keep people in Massachusetts safe from a lot of the most egregious threats that are facing us right now.
How do people get this report of yours if they'd like to read the whole thing here?
They can go to our website at www.aclum.org and look up, it's right on the homepage, but it's Firewalls for Freedom and all the ways that you can get involved. And I think the most important thing for people to realize, you know, it's easy. You know, I was just saying to Trenni, oh, she said, how you doing? I said, I'm watching more sports. She goes, so is everybody else, right?
Yeah.
And that's good. That's a good mental health thing to do. And look at art and listen to music and all those things. But I also think it's important that we not give in to despair because, you know, despair is really what they want. They want us to have despair. They want us to give up and to just give in to authoritarianism. And I don't think we should do that. I think we should be patriots. You know, Massachusetts, from the beginning of the country, has always been at the vanguard and at the forefront of defending democracy. And we shouldn't stop now. The people who came before us did it for us as a favor. We should do it for future generations.
But, you know,
By the way, if I may interrupt, Elizabeth Warren is now questioning the Secretary of Defense nominee Hegseth, and we'll in a few minutes let you know what
Where's
that
his
exchange
mother?
was
Is
like.
she there in the hearing room with him? I'm not sure.
His mother is busy erasing every email she ever sent to Hegseth. It's going to take her most of the day.
You know what I wonder? When you and your colleagues are sitting around shooting the breeze over there at your ACLU, what do they make of the fact, you talked about people knuckling under to authoritarianism.
Right.
It's happening at the highest levels. Jeff Bezos, Zuckerberg, Harvard University. What is going on here? I
think it's fear. You know, I mean, where's the leader who says we have nothing to fear but fear itself, right?
That was
FDR. That was FDR.
But he's not here right now.
Yeah, but we do have Elizabeth Warren and Ed Markey and a really good Mass delegation. And if I might just read to you what Elizabeth Warren put in her letter about Hegseth, it was very funny. I actually wrote it down.
We're ready.
Okay, she says, quote, and this is Senator Warren, I have serious concerns about your qualifications to serve in this role, given your past history, including mismanagement of 2 nonprofit organizations that you ran, accusations of sexual assault, drinking problems, your blatant disregard for contributions of female service members, support for war crimes and torture, threats to politicize the military, advocating for war against political enemies, threats to undermine DoD readiness and diversity, and contempt for veterans receiving the benefits that they've earned. She didn't even mention his mother, but she could have gone there. And even your mother doesn't like you.
Well, yeah, you know, he's found the
Even
Lord.
your mother
He's found the
doesn't
Lord
like
now, and he's praying every morning, and so he's a new man.
Right.
He's a family man now, Jim.
You know, while you're working to do as much preventive stuff as possible, Joe Biden is doing the same thing. He extended temporary protected status to, I think, an additional 1 million people for 18 months.
Right.
Is that something that the next president, come Monday, apparently does not have the power to repeal? Meaning, if he wants to go after these people, meaning Trump, he's got to wait 18 months until this new TPS status
And
expires.
if he tries to, he'll have to see the ACLU and other people in court. But what's important is they can only extend it for 18 months, right? And so, for example, there are a lot of people from Haiti who are on temporary protected status here in Massachusetts, and they got an extension last June. So they're, you know,
it's going to expire earlier.
It's going to expire earlier, and this is just so inhumane. You know, these are people who are escaping places where their lives are in danger. You know, and they're coming
Venezuela,
here.
Ukraine,
Right.
Haiti, those kind of places.
Those kind of places, you know, and I think it's so important as we think and talk about immigration stuff, you know, just to keep in mind, unless you came here as an enslaved person or you're a Native American person, your people were immigrants, and there was no immigration system. So nobody, you know, people who say, well, I came here legally. Well, not necessarily. Like, I don't think the people who landed at the shores in Plymouth were here. Nobody gave them permission. And so I just think it's important to understand the incredible contribution that immigrants have made to this country. I mean, we're so unique. You know, I've lived all over the world.
How about in Los Angeles right now, by the way?
Exactly.
I mean, not only the firefighters that are coming from Mexico at the direction of their president, but undocumented people in and around Los Angeles who are just coming out to help save as many people and as many people's houses and businesses as they can.
And they pay taxes, and they contribute to our economies, and all of these things. So I just think we need to shift the narrative about immigration in this country and stop giving in to this fear-mongering that's taken over our conversations
like the
around
Democrats are
immigration.
doing by supporting this
Like
bill.
in Riley,
Yeah,
the Lake and Riley
absolutely.
bill. No
We're
due
going to discuss
process.
it with John King in
Yeah.
a little bit.
So I wanted to ask you, you know, a lot of people may not have liked the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare at the beginning, but they began to like it more when their kids got covered under insurance until they were 26 years old. And you got all these no-cost preventative care like cancer screenings, immunizations, contraception. Millions of Americans got that. Now this religious group is saying that they don't like this. So this could go before the Supreme Court with a bunch of overzealous Catholics, but 6-3 conservatives. And tell me again why somebody's religious beliefs get to be thrust on the whole rest of the country that doesn't believe them. I don't understand how that can be legit. So you want to practice your religion, do it. Don't force everybody else to practice your religion.
Yeah, and that's why it's so important. You know, the First Amendment, people think of it as the Free Speech Amendment, but it's also the Free Religion Amendment. And you cannot have free exercise of your religion unless you also have the Anti-Establishment Clause, meaning the government can't endorse one religion because they might pick my religion and not your religion.
Well, that's what they're doing, isn't
And that's
it?
what they're trying to do here. And this is part of the corruption that we've talked about in the past of the U.S. Supreme Court right now. And so this is a case that they just took up. They're going to be arguing it, and the decision will probably come down in June. I think they're arguing it in April. It's Becerra versus Braidwood Management. And this is a case out of the Fifth Circuit, which is the most conservative, sort of religiously ideological appellate court, federal court. And basically, they're trying to say that the U.S. Preventive Services Task Force, which is part of Health and Human Services, can't issue recommendations for preventive medical services. And what they're targeting are drugs that prevent people from getting AIDS, from getting HIV. And so this is an anti-gay lawsuit, basically. But it's going to affect everybody.
Prevent
I mean, if you take
people from getting AIDS, which I think, generally speaking, we all want to do.
We all want to do, but it wouldn't even just affect those. I mean, it obviously would affect contraception, birth control, because that's preventative. But it would also, like, if you take a statin, Right? It could prevent you from being able to get access to your statin and things like that. So there are so many medications that we take, and we know how much more expensive it is to treat people once they're sick than to prevent them from getting sick in the first place.
So where is the lawsuit? This is another one, Christian group.
Yes, it is.
Quotes. So where is the lawsuit from the Buddhists or Jews who are not conservative Jews or other religious groups?
There is a lawsuit out there brought by a Jewish group saying that access to abortion is a religious liberty issue. Right. So there are people trying that, but I think the stronger argument to make, and the argument the ACLU makes, is that government shouldn't be involved in imposing religion on anybody. And so people should comply. You don't have to agree. Your religion doesn't have to agree with what the government is doing.
The Supreme Court already has on abortion.
Right. But they shouldn't. Well, they've said it goes to the states. That's sort of how they did it. But the impact is that in the states, that's what happens. But, however you feel about whether it's about abortion care or, gender-affirming care or anything else like that, have your view. But the government shouldn't tell you what to do. The question isn't what you're doing in your bedroom. The question is, what is the government doing in your bedroom?
So, you and Marjorie were discussing the narrow focus of what this lawsuit this appeal before the Supreme Court is. But as we know, even Amy Coney Barrett has said some of her conservative colleagues' judgments, rulings have gone well beyond what the case before them required. So what is the likelihood that this rogue court decides this is a perfect opportunity not just to deal with the preventive care thing, but to revisit whether Obamacare is as we all know, wasn't it 5-4 with Roberts casting the deciding vote to preserve Obamacare? Well, we know that Roberts is sort of lost his whatever on immunity and other decisions. There's nothing that precludes a 5-vote or a 6, well, probably not Coney Barrett, but a 5-vote majority from tossing out Obamacare, right?
Well, I mean, this court is just ideological, and they're not bound by past precedent. They're not bound by anything, apparently, except for their ideology. So it's really concerning because that means that all three branches of the government seem to be captured by ideologues, and that's why the action is moving to the states. And that's why it's so important that our state leaders and that our municipal leaders and that every individual get involved, because we need to save our democracy. I'm not acting because I'm hopeful, but I do get hope from the action. And I think there's a lot that we can do, and giving in and giving up is actually giving way to authoritarianism. So there's so much that we can do. And the ACLU and other groups are working really hard and creating opportunities for people to get involved and to become a part of standing up to authoritarianism. Because you know what? Win or lose, our grandchildren and great-grandchildren will look back and say, what did you do to stop it?
That's right, Jim.
So we have to
what do we do?
Drop the despair thing on this show.
Okay,
we're talking to Carol Rose. Carol, one more thing about the Supreme Court. Let's talk about despair for another minute. Let's talk
I was talking about hope, Jim.
Occasionally, this Supreme Court, actually surprisingly, not recently, actually, has stood up to Trump. By 5-4, they did, even though it didn't take much, stand up to him on whether or not he could be sentenced on his felonies.
Right.
It's appalling that 4 people said he could
Kavanaugh surprised me. I thought he would be on the other side.
Yeah. The 2 conservatives were Roberts and Coney Barrett, who sided with the 3 liberals.
She's unpredictable.
She is in a hopeful way.
I have hope for her.
Let's do the other side. There's been a lot of writing about this, where the Supreme Court rules against Donald Trump, and Donald Trump does what I assume he could do without missing a beat, just defies the Supreme Court of the United States. And I fear, this is the despair part, every single person who supports him would nod their head. He was right to do that because they exceeded their authority, they're corrupt, they don't love our leader, et cetera, et cetera. What happens then?
Well, Jim, I mean, obviously we all are worried about somebody. He's just a scofflaw, and he always has been, and he continues to be. And when that happens, when a democracy is that much under attack, then it goes to the people and the power of the people to rise up and to say, not on my watch, not during my lifetime, not without a fight.
When are they doing that again?
Well, you know what? Like I said, we've had thousands of people who've signed up to join the ACLU and to become part of our action team. We have lawyers who are signed up. We have non-lawyers who are signed up. There are lots of things that we can do. And the most important place to start is with yourself, and then with your city or town, then with the state. And if we can build those firewalls, I think we can withstand this and then turn the tide. I think it's really important.
One last despair moment here, and then we'll try to be as hopeful, or at least half as hopeful as you are. We were talking to Khalil Gibran Muhammad yesterday. history from Harvard. He's now primarily at Princeton, still has a Harvard connection. And
he left Harvard because he felt he got very little defense from them when he was attacked in Congress.
I would say none.
None.
He was attacked. His
by
course
Virginia
was
Fox.
attacked
His
by
course.
the chair of the Education Committee.
Yep.
His thing there. We have talked about why they're not more Mike Roth. Roth is the president of Wesleyan, who actually took on Harvard when Harvard did this neutral BS a few months ago, cowering in the face of Trump. You wrote a letter to, 77 private and public
I love this.
colleges. What did you say? And I'm really dying to hear what kind of response, if any, you got from any of these people who are hunkered down in their basements rather than standing up to autocracy.
I think they're hunkered down in their basements. And I think, higher education is under attack, and we're going to see a direct attack on that. And I think once these universities realize that cowering and hiding in their bunkers isn't going to work, that they're going to realize the best thing they can do is to stand up. We all have encountered bullies in our lives, right? And the bully will try to go after somebody, and the person who stands up to them, he won't like it, but he won't bully them again. The person who cowers and gives in, they come back to that person time and time and time again.
70 million plus people just voted for the bully. What did you say? They did. It's a reality. They did. What
eggs, Jim.
What did your letter say?
Eggs.
What did your letter say? What were you asking of the
So what we did is we
presidents?
took a look at all of the policies around protests and things on campuses, and we looked at which universities had good policies, which ones had bad policies, and some of the things that we were saying. For example, you shouldn't say that somebody has to get a permit 3 weeks in advance to have a protest, because it may be they're protesting something that just happened yesterday, right? So there have to be exceptions to things like
For
that.
spontaneity.
For spontaneity,
Under
right.
the First Amendment.
Right. There need to be due process protections for people, for students and for faculty for speaking out. Even a private university that may not be legally subject to the First Amendment and the free speech protections, don't you think that students who are going to those universities have a right, just ethically and morally, to also be protected by free speech protections? So those are the kinds of things, and they were very pragmatic recommendations for the universities to take. And we're hopeful that many of them will. We've been in touch with the legal counsel at some of them, and we're trying to work collaboratively. There's that good word in a good way. But we're trying to work with them to find a way to make sure that our universities aren't under attack. The last time they were under attack was with Joe McCarthy. He wanted to undermine higher education, and they're going to go after it again. And I think it's going to be really important that university leaders not act out of fear, but in fact stand up courageously, because that's how bullies will back down.
Do you like quizzes?
Sometimes.
You're getting a quiz.
Okay.
Since you mentioned Joe McCarthy, what's a connection between Joe McCarthy, or who's the connection between Joe McCarthy and a young Donald Trump?
Roy Cohn.
Roy Cohn.
Yeah.
Counsel to the McCarthy committee ended up being the counsel to the Trump family, and the guy who taught Trump that if you deny the truth relentlessly and forever, people will ultimately believe
Okay.
And it's worked very well.
And here's another link, which is the link to Joe McCarthy in Massachusetts, which is when Joe Walsh from the law firm Hale and Dorr, now Wilmer Hale, stood up and said, "After all, have you no sense of decency,
One
sir?"
of the most brilliant and powerful moments in American history.
Someone stood up
true.
to the bully Joe McCarthy. That was the end of the McCarthy period. And I think it's time for all of us, in our whatever capacities we have, to stand up and say no once again.
10 seconds, 15 seconds. An anonymous texter says, can you please ask if religious communities, meaning churches, can protect undocumented individuals in their buildings? My understanding is that's not a law. That's been a practice that Homans and Trump say they have no intention of
Whether
honoring.
churches have a religious right to do that. And I would just say to the texter, give a call to the ACLU. It's a
Fabulous.
complicated
Great.
answer, but we're happy to work with you.
Carol, it's good to see you. Thanks so
Thank
much
you.
for your time. Carol Rose.
Thank you very much, Carol Rose. We've been speaking with Carol Rose. She is head of the ACLU, executive director, I should say, of the ACLU of Massachusetts. Carol, thank you very much. Coming up after a quick break, we're going to talk to CNN's John King. He's going to zoom in from Washington. We're going to talk to him about the inauguration, which is it was less than a week away. The new Jack Smith, the special prosecutor's report about the takeover attempt of the government by Donald Trump and what it means, and a lot of other news out of Washington. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
from the highlights of 2024.
Passing the Affordable Homes Act, a $5 billion law that I proposed and signed that's going to create more housing.
To what's on the agenda for 2025.
We've got to do better in terms of transportation.
Governor Healy lays out the state of the Commonwealth.
The true strength of this great state is our people.
Listen live Thursday night starting at 7 on GBH 89.7. Online at gbhnews.org.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you and the Office of the Massachusetts State Treasurer. The Unclaimed Property Division is holding unclaimed funds from utility bills, uncashed paychecks, savings accounts, and more. To see if you have unclaimed money, you can visit findmassmoney.gov. And Subaru of New England. This winter, you can explore New England in the all-wheel drive 2025 Subaru Outback. You can find your Subaru retailer at SubaruofNewEngland.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. We're live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. At 1 o'clock, which is 27 minutes from now, the Attorney General, Andrea Campbell, joins us in person here for Ask the AG. And if you're at the library, you can actually go to the microphone. One of our colleagues will be there and ask her a question directly. In the interim, though, we're joined on Zoom now by not just the Pride of Dorchester. The Pride of Dorchester apparently is in Dorchester. That'd be CNN Chief National Correspondent, John King. What are you doing here, John?
So, welcome from the Erie Pub in beautiful.
Oh my God!
Yes,
good place
to come for lunch. Donald Trump won 2 precincts in the city of Boston, and they happen to be in my hometown of Dorchester, and I'm in one of them right now. Here to talk to some Trump voters and Trump supporters about what they expect now that the inauguration is coming, what they're looking for, why they voted for him, why and what we view where I grew up is a very blue-collar neighborhood. When I grew up, Kennedy Democrats, but remember Jim and Marjorie, we had some Reagan Democrats, and now we have some Trump Democrats. So I came home to talk to people who voted for Trump, turned this precinct red, and the one next to it red, about what they expect.
I can't wait to hear.
Okay, so when am I going to see the Erie Pub on TV? Tonight? Sunday night. Sunday night?
Pre-inaugural coverage.
Okay, pre-inaugural coverage. I'm very excited about that. Having spent a few hours here and there in the Erie Pub myself. So since you've been in the Erie Pub, you may have not been following the Hegseth hearings this morning. Have you been following what's going on up there at all? I don't think.
Yeah, I've been reading it. I was reading it when I came in here. Watched a little bit in the car ride in from Logan this morning.
Yeah.
And looked, it's really interesting in that the Republicans who early on had some doubts about him are trying to mute their doubts, if you will. And this is a giant test for the Democrats. You see Jack Reed from neighboring Rhode Island. He's the ranking Democrat on the committee, saying, I don't think you're up to the job. You see Elizabeth Warren from right here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts saying, I don't like the way you treat people. I don't think you're up to the job. The question is, it looks like the Democrats will be either unanimous or near unanimous in their opposition. The key really comes down here to, your Lisa Murkowski, your Susan Collins, your Joni Ernst. I would say the women, the female Republican senators, probably have Pete Hegseth's fate in their hands.
Speaking of, go ahead.
I was just going to say, speaking of Joni Ernst, a survivor of sexual assault herself, she was
and a veteran.
And that's right, and a veteran, very skeptical of Hegseth at the start. What I've read is that because she was threatened to be primaried, she's going to turn around and support him.
I think these answers at the hearing will have a say to that. But Marjorie, look, the one thing, like it or not, Trump people and MAGA-affiliated interest groups have done a remarkable job, not agreeing or disagreeing, not my job, but in terms of turning up the heat and the pressure and sending essentially shots across the bow of these Republicans. And Hegseth is one of the first ones. Tulsi Gabbard is another one. Kash Patel for the FBI will be another one. Robert Kennedy Jr. For HHS. There are several of them who are, I wouldn't say in trouble, but there's some doubt about, iffy about. And Trump allies have essentially done exactly what you have said, that we will primary you, we will make your life miserable, we will ring your phones off the hook, we will be outside your office protesting. It's time to get in line. And so this is a giant test of Trump's power, of the power and the persuasion of his political affiliated groups, if you will, and how many Republicans, how courageous will Republicans be in airing what we know from private conversations are very significant doubts about the qualifications of several of these picks.
John, I should know this, but I'm not aware of why the Armed Services Committee hearing for Hegseth is the first. And I'm guessing, and I know you'll correct me politely if I'm wrong, is that the Republicans are feeling if we can win this one, the trickle-down effect is we'll win everyone because this is the toughest for us. Is that right, or is there another motivation here?
I think that's part of it. Look, you also want to have your defense secretary on the job on day one if you can. Look around the world. It's a dangerous world, and you want to have that transition be. So usually you have defense and state and treasury move to the top of the list, and then you'll have the other jobs backfilling behind that. But you're also exactly right. Some of these other ones have been delayed a little bit. It's supposed to be this week, moved a week or so. Some of that's just the bureaucracy and getting the paperwork done, the background checks done. But some of it, no doubt, Jim, is exactly what you're saying. If they think that, Hegseth is probably the most in doubt, if you will, Tulsi Gabbard. So that if you can get this one through, this is a message vote. It's not just about that one job. It's about Trump's clout. And I would say again, I flip that. People say it's about Trump's clout. I would flip it and say it's about, in this new era of an all-Republican Congress, how willing a Republican's got to be to stand up and say, not this one, sir.
On a related note, John, you mentioned you want, in a dangerous world, you want your defense secretary in place immediately when you're sworn in. There are reports that there may be a ceasefire and a release of hostages imminent in Gaza. And on one hand, Joe Biden has been relentless about this with 6 days to go. On the other hand, Donald Trump, who's very close to Netanyahu, has said there's going to be hell to pay, and I'm paraphrasing, but it's close to that, if this isn't done by the day I take office. What are people who are impartial as opposed to partisan saying is bringing this thing to a head with 6 days to go? The threat of Trump or the good work of Joe Biden?
I think it's a combination of both, to be honest with you. And I wouldn't say so much the threat of Trump, but if Netanyahu wants to have goodwill with the new administration, clearly he has a big ally there. Netanyahu would like to expand settlements, right, and go out into the West Bank and more. The war is a pain. You can look at the public opinion polling and say Netanyahu's support has gone up. At the same time, the protests from the hostage families, the protests from other people. So Netanyahu would like to turn the page here. The Biden administration has spent months and months and months and countless hours here. I would liken it somewhat to Jimmy Carter and the hostages, and being released just as Ronald Reagan was coming into power. Yeah. But you do have this magical moment. I'm calling it a magical moment in the world, but the American transformation of power, where the work of the last administration and then the pressure and the freshness of the new administration do come together. And well, look, Trump is going to say this was all Trump. We saw it. We talked last week about the press conference where Trump says it's all about him. I'm not discounting the role of the Trump administration, but Trump's own people have said the Biden administration, A, they're taking the lead in the negotiations, and B, that they have been beyond professional and courteous in exchanging information and keeping them in the loop. Because when President Trump takes his hand off the Bible, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, it's his, right? It's his. It's all his come next week. And so the Biden administration has actually done this tirelessly, and I would argue quite professionally and as apolitically as possible.
So what do we think is going to happen day one when Trump takes office? We've talked about executive orders. We've talked about mass deportations. We've talked about, other things he's going to do on day one. What do you think is actually going to happen?
Our team covering him closely, Marjorie, says they hear it could be 100 or more executive orders on day one. And so, obviously setting in place new immigration policies, including mass deportations, is one thing the former president has promised. Reversing some of the Joe Biden efforts is something the president has promised. So does he issue executive orders to try to reverse Biden executive orders? Excuse me, I would look for that. Beyond that, looking for January 6th pardons. Does he do that right out of the gate on day one? He certainly intimated to his supporters during the campaign that he would do it right away. And I think he has said on day one. I think he's also given other time frames. So those are the big ones. And I think a lot of them, we've all been told prepare to work late that day because we're told he's going to start doing some while he's still at the Capitol. And then you have the parade, of course, the march down Pennsylvania Avenue, the motorcade. And then when he gets to the White House, we're told there will be many more, potentially dozens more, into the afternoon and evening.
But on a couple of the things that he said he was going to deal with right away, he campaigned saying, I'm going to bring down grocery prices immediately. And now he's saying in interviews, it's hard. He's used the word hard a few times. On tariffs, I heard last night as I was falling asleep, may have been on CNN actually, about how his economic advisors are talking about phasing in the tariffs potentially without his approval yet. So sort of backing off his on day one it's going to happen. The one that I worry most about, because the human element is the most intense, is this mass deportation thing. And this Tom Homans seems like a take all prisoners kind of guy who's this point person on this. Do we have any idea with 6 days to go what kind of shape this, quote, mass deportation might have in its early days, John King?
We know one of the questions there, Jim, has been, whether the United States military could get involved, either as part of the policy or if there are protests against the policy. That's another question. A lot of trepidation at the Pentagon, and especially among retired military, as to whether the military gets involved in any of these policies or called out to, I'm going to use the word enforce, but block protests or do things like that. Look, you're right about Homan. He has been very clear that he believes he should start acting on day one, and they want to send a message. We don't have the firm details of that. Is it a pilot program, right? Do you do it in one place or one city, or is it more nationwide, or is it 6, 8, or 10 big cities? They have made clear that what they call sanctuary cities, which tend to be Democratic liberal cities, will be targeted quickly. So I think you're going to look for enforcement actions, right? Major raids maybe on certain businesses to look for undocumented workers. That's one of the questions. So you hear a lot. And you also hear, to your point about tariffs, you hear some moderating forces saying, well, we can do this, on an incremental basis, or let's send a message and see what happens. And maybe we don't have to do the whole full scale of it if people, get the message. But we don't know the answer to that. And we do know that this Trump team is much more loyal and less establishment, less, traditional Washington guard than the old Trump team. So I think that there's no question there's already tension, especially on the economic team. But I don't think we know. Will Donald Trump listen to them, or will Donald Trump say, no, we do it my way. We're not doing it the Washington way this time? That's one of the giant questions that we'll start to answer next week.
Talking to John King, who is not in Washington. He's at the Erie Pub in Dorchester, allegedly doing interviews for a Sunday night piece on CNN on Inauguration Eve.
So, John King, the special prosecutor Jack Smith has released his report about the attempts of the president to overthrow the election back in January, leading up to after the election, after the election in January. Anything new that struck you, or what is the impact? I know that at the President-elect's press conference last week, that you guys reported at CNN, and I read it elsewhere, that one of the reasons Trump seemed to be so angry was about these prosecutions. What's, if anything, has changed with the release of the report?
I think we know most of the broad strokes. I was reading some of that late last night before I went to sleep. It was released after midnight last night in the early morning hours. Some new granular details of the big broad strokes we knew about the pressure on Pence, for example, and Trump in meetings with certain people saying, what else can we do? What else can we do? What else can we do? But to me, the most dramatic part, and Jack Smith clearly decided he wanted to put this in writing in a firm way, was he stated the opinion that he had no doubt that if this came to trial, that the president-elect now of the United States, but that Donald Trump, the former president, would be convicted. That he said that the evidence was overwhelming, and he believed he could win a conviction on these charges. Then they also went on to say they understand they can't prosecute him because the law is clear that he's about to be president again. But just that, when you write that sentence, number one, you're a prosecutor. That's the right. You want to make your case as clearly as you can. But number two, you're going to get under Donald Trump's skin, to the point you just made, Marjorie, is that Trump is beyond annoyed. I'm using that's sort of a gentle word there, at the fact that in his view, this is the out to get him. But I would come back to a point I've made many times here. Every time you see a report like this, look at who the footnotes are, look at the quotations, who is it attributed to? It's not attributed to Jack Smith. Those are Jack Smith's conclusions.
Right.
But they're based on testimony from people who worked at the right hand of Donald Trump when all this was playing out. They are the witnesses. Jack Smith is pulling their testimony together and making his legal conclusion. But the witnesses are people who worked for Trump, paid by Trump, loyal to Trump, at least until the end.
John, we're obviously talking almost exclusively about what Republicans are doing, because they have the presidency, they have the Senate, they have the House. What exactly are the Democrats doing a couple of months in from November? I mean, we've talked on the show quite a bit about a significant number of reps and senators who are Democrats, at least so far, signing on to this Laken Riley immigration. And Laken Riley, I'm sure everybody knows, is the young nursing student in Georgia, was murdered by an undocumented person. And as we've said on the air, and I assume most people have been following this know, this would require detention of undocumented people, not who were only convicted of a crime, but charged or accused of a crime. And even if they are ultimately cleared, they still stay in detention. And it seems to me, even though I wasn't much of a lawyer, there's a due process issue there, which seems to me that the Democrats are just floundering, have no idea what to do except imitate Republicans. Is there a consensus forming about how to lead the opposition starting Monday?
I would say no. I would say no is the answer to that question. I think you'll see some of it in these personnel hearings, the confirmation hearings on Capitol Hill, where I do think Democrats are more united against Trump appointees, right? But on the policies, that gets interesting. You have a split among Democrats. A lot of Democrats are going to support this Laken Riley Act because they believe one of the messages from the election was that Democrats need to be tougher on border security. Now, border security is different from mass deportations. You were just having a conversation, an ACLU conversation. Border security is different with, do you keep people who have only been charged, right? Or what if they're cleared? Maybe they're undocumented, maybe they're here. So how do you handle all that? I think there's a broad debate within Democratic Party. You're going to see a lot of progressives being angry about Democrats who support some of the Trump policies. And I think that's one of the fascinating challenges because, who leads the Democrats, right? The vice president she was the nominee. So on paper, she's the leader of the Democratic Party. But there's, the next 2-4 years are going to be a giant scramble for who are the leading voices. And I emphasize the plural there of the Democratic Party. And I think that's going to take shape in many different ways. And it could be very issue dependent early on economic issues versus immigration issues versus, other issues, the cultural issues. And so this is a fascinating test for the Democrats.
Well, Carol Rose, the ACLU executive director you just mentioned, John, used the word collaboration when she was talking about people willing to stand up to some of the policies that she viewed as unlawful or bad under President Trump. And as you just said, it's one thing to want a tighter border, and I think most people, even a lot of Democrats, can agree it took Biden a long time to realize how upset people were about the border and how upset people were about people coming into their neighborhoods, et cetera. But as you said, this Laken Riley thing is detaining even minors on an accusation of shoplifting or more serious crimes. I mean, detaining and possibly deporting it. That just seems so un-American, no due process, no court hearing, no nothing.
So part of the challenge there is do Democrats get the right to offer amendments in the Senate, right? In the House, they will not. You have the Republican control. Although, again, the Republican majority is so small in the House. Watch some of the people in vulnerable districts to see if there's any wiggle room on their part. I don't see it at the moment, but that doesn't mean it can't come out. But you make a great point. So Republicans are forcing this, right? Which is, if you're them, smart on their part. It's a huge issue in the campaign. I can tell you the border is a giant issue around this bar I'm sitting in, where a lot of people say they went Trump's way, border and cost of living. So they want action, and they want it right away. Sometimes when you ask for action right away, maybe people get a little far out over their skis or they go a little too far. You're going to see this play out in the courts. You're going to see mayors and governors, including the governor of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Remember when she was Attorney General? Democratic attorneys general went after a lot of Trump policies back in the first term. You're going to see Democratic attorneys general and governors and mayors forced to make choices about Trump policies in the second term. And I think those legal fights are going to start, again, as soon as within hours of the hand coming off the Bible.
We have one of those Democratic attorney generals coming in about 10 minutes here, by the way.
Just hold on for a second. John King, you're an Irishman. You're sitting there in an Irish bar in Dorchester. We all remember when we were overrun by Irishmen a couple of decades ago when things were really going bad in Ireland. It was an amazing thing, in this Irish town. I didn't hear a lot of bitching and moaning about that. Did you?
No.
Okay.
I get your point. The lady is correct.
Okay.
Okay, so John, before you go, we know we have to wait till Sunday night to find out what your friends at the Erie Pub in Dorchester, what caused them to vote for Donald Trump and how they feel about him now. But I assume you already know. How do they feel about the new coach of the Patriots, Mike Vrabel?
They're very happy. They're very happy in here. That was funny, Jim. I asked about that before I asked about politics.
I knew you would.
You're shocked about that. We had a few sports conversations. This is where you have, that people have Patriots hoodies and Celtics hats and Red Sox jerseys. Yeah, we mix and match here. That's what we do.
Remember when Ronald Reagan came to the Erie pub years ago when he was the president? Remember that? That was a big moment.
I'm looking at the pictures of Ronald Reagan on the wall, and then just to the left is I was here as an AP reporter with Bill Clinton when Ray Flynn brought him in here back in 1992.
Me too. I was here there too.
Yeah, so you have Reagan on one side of the wall, and then you have Clinton up there. I just asked the owner, John Stenson, would Donald Trump be welcome here, and he said absolutely.
Well, that's too bad. But thank you very much, John.
But you're welcome too. You're welcome too, Marjorie and Jim.
Thank you very much. I'll come in incognito.
Hey, John, we'll be watching Sunday night, and I'm really dying to see this report. It's great. Welcome home, and we'll see you soon. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, John. Great to talk to you.
I'll see you in studio soon enough.
We hope so. We
great.
really, really hope so.
We've been speaking with CNN Chief National Correspondent John King. Don't you love John?
I'm fairly fond of him.
Yes,
he really
he's
is
very calm and
incredibly
middle
talented
of the road.
soul.
Okay, coming up.
It's also one of the only people from mainstream media who can talk to people of all political stripes and have them feel that he will give them a fair deal, which is really important in these partisan times.
Well, he's a great reporter.
He is
right?
a
He's a great reporter
and a fair reporter.
That's what reporters are supposed to do. They're supposed to talk to people on all sides and give both of their points of view. Different than what we are, Jim, which is we are not reporters, and I'm not one anymore.
Well, you were.
I was for years, but not one anymore. Anyway, it's a lot harder to do, by the way, than this. Anyway, coming up after a quick break, we're trying something new. You know why we're trying something new?
Why is that?
Because we're doing this texting segment for a while. You know, we would read the text right before the 1 o'clock hour, and Jim said he didn't like it.
This is nuts.
So now...
I mean, you got to
terrible.
be kidding.
I think he thought it was terrible because I was reading the text, and that was the end of that. So we're moving.
By the way, that was an internal conversation in a staff meeting.
Too late. We're moving on now. We're going to try something new. Let's hope we don't screw this up. It's going to be called One More Thing. Stay tuned for One More Thing, or Two More Things. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library, and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
A new hospital program has some doctors considering the role of spirituality as part of patient care.
We've been able to overcome taboos and talk about patients' sexual activities, their drug use, but somehow we've not been able to ask them about spiritual beliefs and practices.
I'm Elsa Chang, spiritual support as part of hospital care on All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for our programs comes from you. And Boston Medical Center, committed to delivering medical excellence that empowers all patients. Learn more about how BMC's team of experts is rewriting healthcare for cancer, sickle cell, and beyond at bmc.org. And Comcast Business, committed to providing connectivity for your business with network and cybersecurity solutions. Comcast Business, powering possibilities. Restrictions apply. To learn more, you can call or visit comcastbusiness.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan, live from the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. At 1 o'clock in about 10 minutes, the Attorney General will join us, Andrea Campbell, here for Ask the AG. For the next few minutes before Henry's 1 o'clock news, we are trying something new.
We are.
We're dedicating, don't. Dedicating some time to a story from the news that Marjorie and I wanted to highlight. We didn't have time for today, and I wasn't crazy about the tech segment. In any case, so without further ado, here's one more thing, which actually should be called two more things, because we're each going to list something.
Yes.
Here's Governor Healy.
I think they should be abolished. I think they should go away. I totally support that and support taking action to make that happen. We're an expensive state, right? I know that. So Mike's question about why do I have to pay these exorbitant fees to a broker who's doing nothing for me, really, in terms of landing this apartment? Yeah, that stuff should just go away.
As I say, that should be Governor Healy. That was Governor Healy on our show last week. Mike was a texter who is getting action. She said she totally supported abolishing brokers' fees in the state. And just last night, she announced that in her budget filing later this month, there will be that provision, and it may be transferred to the landlord and that sort of thing. Now, the good news is, because we're usually skeptical about the legislature, Marjorie, the Senate is already on board, at least. Here is the response last night from the Speaker of the House. Exactly. No response. I'll wait till I see the legislation. By the way, in all seriousness, this is people get action. A guy texts, you read the text, the governor responds. Within days, she files this thing. We'll find out if the attorney general supports it in a minute. Like New York City, it might have the landlord paying. That may, some people saying, well, the landlord's just going to pass on if they hired the broker the fee. But as I said the other day, most landlords, not all, are charging as much as they can already. So I wouldn't worry about that. And while Beacon Hill is a place where lots of good ideas go to die, I'm really hopeful, based upon the last week or so of this, that we might actually join New York City and the desire of places like Somerville, Boston, and Cambridge to get rid of brokers' fees. So that's the update. What was your story we missed?
Well, I just want to, we have a couple of texts here. First, an anonymous texter says about one more thing, which is what you just debuted, Jim.
Yeah.
Bring back the 2 o'clock news.
Okay, good. That's not our decision. Go ahead.
And then Aaron in Boston says, Jim, I listened to the top of the show to see what the text prompt was, and now just before 1 o'clock, you guys announced you're not doing it. That's very rude, says the texter.
Okay, so Marjorie's exposing internal affairs here. What exactly is your one more thing?
Well, since I was pressed to do one more thing, I could not believe when I read that Republicans in the House, including the Speaker of the House, we've all been watching these horrible fires out in Los Angeles. It's like Armageddon out there.
And there may be a few more days of
tragedy. That's right. That they want to link wildfire funding, the money that goes to help these people, they want to link it to raising the debt limit. These politicians don't agree to raise the debt limit in California or all across the country. They don't agree to raise the debt limit. They're not going to get the money. I could not believe that. This is Mike Johnson, another so-called Christian, love thy neighbor guy, wears his faith on his sleeve.
Speaker of the House.
Yeah, he can't. That's his idea. And by the way, California has some of the strictest building laws in the nation. And the more you read about this fire, you could say, these fires, you could say if there were an extra fire truck here, a few extra fire trucks, a few extra firefighters, more water and the hydrant stuff, it would have mattered on the edges. It's climate change. It's climate change. But you don't belly up to the bar, and you don't.
GBH member, you can access thousands of hours of PBS programs online with GBH Passport. If you're already a member, just register online today or become a member and sign up instantly at gbh.org/passport.
Support for GBH comes from you. And the Skating Club of Boston, presenting the ISU World Figure Skating Championships with over 300 athletes competing at TD Garden March 25th through 30th for the title of World Champion. Tickets at isuworlds2025.com. And New England Recovery Center, providing inpatient addiction treatment in state-of-the-art facilities located in Westboro, Mass. Learn more at newenglandrecoverycenter.org or by calling 1-877-MY-REHAB.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH, HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. GBH News, what matters to you?
I'm Jim Browdy, ahead on Hour 3 of Boston Public Radio.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Lakshmi Singh. The nominee for Secretary of Defense is defending himself against a range of serious allegations. Hegseth has said that as Defense Secretary, he would not drink alcohol. The ferocious wildfires in Southern California are projected to be one of the most financially costly disasters in U.S. history, according to experts from AccuWeather. NPR's Natalie Escobar reports that insurance payouts will come at a difficult time for home insurance markets in California and other parts of the U.S., in part because of climate change.
Insurance rates have been going up in California. Climate change has made temperatures rise and vegetation dry out. It's fueled wildfire seasons that have become even more destructive and expensive. Some companies have stopped writing new policies or left the state altogether. Policyholders across the country are also losing coverage and getting rate increases, according to Carolyn Kowski of the Environmental Defense Fund.
Continually increasing risk, uncertainty about how that risk is changing really breaks our traditional models of insurance.
As a result, she says, home insurance is one place
more or less depends on their individual health insurance plan. Sydney Lupkin, NPR News.
It's NPR.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. Massachusetts Congressman Richard Neal says he's hoping for the best when he attends the second inauguration of Donald Trump on Monday, January 20th. According to the Springfield Republican, in sports, the Bruins host Tampa Bay at the Garden tonight, and it's day 4 at the Australian Open today, where it's 80 degrees down under. In the forecast around here, sunny low 30s today, clear mid-20s overnight, mostly sunny low 30s tomorrow, mostly cloudy low 30s on Thursday. No snow in the foreseeable future. Time for Ask the Attorney General with Boston Public Radio at Boston Public Library. I'm Henry Santoro. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Indeed, designed to be an end-to-end hiring solution for businesses of all sizes to attract, interview, and hire candidates, all from one platform. Learn more at Indeed.com/NPR.
He's Jim Browdy. I am Marjorie Egan. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH.
Colleague Hannah, who would be right there, that would be Hannah, and she might let you use the microphone to ask the Attorney General a question directly.
Attorney General, thank you very much for coming in. When we used to talk to Maura Healey when she was the Attorney General in Trump round 1, she was often in the midst of doing her own suit or filing some other suit or joining another suit with other Attorneys General against something the Trump administration was doing. How are you preparing for Trump round 2? What are you concerned about?
Well, I've been stressing to folks, we are prepared. We're participating in a lot of contingency planning just in case, just like we always do. My job is to protect the residents of the Commonwealth and, of course, our economy as well. So number one is I want to stress that if the president-elect does things that help our residents, that address issues of affordability as he promised, help our economy, I will be right there applauding the president and, of course, working in collaboration. And then where he, like anyone else, harms our residents or our economy, we'll be there to hold him accountable. What I'm concerned about is the rhetoric, of course, especially everything related to mass deportations, and the language around that suggests that it will absolutely be an illegal operation if you round up millions of people, including those who are here lawfully, which last I checked, we rely on an immigrant population for our healthcare industry, our higher ed industry. That will affect our economy. And of course, the basic rights of folks walking around Massachusetts who could be rounded up. It's never been something a president has ever promised or pledged to do here in this country, so we should all be concerned. I'm also concerned about the rhetoric in terms of not just the nominees to various agencies, but the lack of substance, the loyalty that they have to the president. Some of these public safety agencies and law enforcement agencies should be used to promote public safety, not to go after political enemies. These are taxpayer resources that should be directed to public safety efforts, so I'm concerned about that. But at the end of the day, we're ready. We have litigation tools. We can go in court and sue the federal government if we have to. We have resources to put out to organizations to help them respond themselves. We can file legislation to fight back at the State House. And most importantly, I think this is going to become a more increasingly important role. We are a trusted authority to provide factual information, given the misinformation that's out there, which is really concerning.
You know, we talked about the mass deportation thing, which both the new president, soon-to-be president again, and this Tom Homan, who is his attack dog on this, is promised. He's trashed the mayor of Boston.
Who, by the way, today's the mayor's birthday. And she just had a little
kid
girl.
Yesterday. Yes.
We were pregnant at the same time on the council, so congratulations to Mayor Wu. It's
indeed,
it's a big deal.
So I'm not on this mass deportation thing. We talked to Carol Rose from the Civil Liberties Union before. I'm not clear. My understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong anywhere along the way, the state cops would not assist ICE unless there's a warrant, and the same with local law enforcement. You're nodding in agreement. Okay, so no assist except in those circumstances. I'll pose the same question. It was addressed in the New York Times, in the New York Times system. An ICE agent comes to a school and says, I'm here for that kid in that classroom. What does that family do? What does that school do? What should they do to protect, or can they do anything to protect that child?
Absolutely. And so one of the things that I want to be careful on is a lot of what's out there right now is hypotheticals. We don't know what's going to happen, what they're going to do. We don't know what day one will look like in terms of the executive orders they put forward.
That's right.
Or these ideas that they have in terms of mobilizing the National Guard. I'm obviously in conversation with the governor, the administration. We're in conversation with various stakeholders, including school districts, law enforcement agencies. And if anything, we're telling our law enforcement agencies, including those federal law enforcement agencies that we work with all the time, that our job is to promote the public safety of our residents, getting guns off the street, drugs off the street. That has not slowed down. We are busier than ever before. We've built great relationships with our federal partners, and that we will not redirect federal resources or state resources to push an unlawful agenda, for example, of deporting innocent people unlawfully. If, for example, they have the proper paperwork and things have gone through proper channels legally to take someone and to deport them for some reason, fine. And I'll give you some examples. We do that already. I have a criminal bureau in my office, a state police division that works incredibly hard on a whole bunch of public safety cases. We hold folks accountable for perpetuating crimes in our communities, whether they are citizens or not. And so if someone, for example, does a crime in our community and we find they are here without the proper paperwork, they are deported. That work is undergoing. And right now you have language out there suggesting that's not happening and making it sound like it's something else.
So, but forget the criminals, where I think everybody agrees, not the crime of crossing the border, a serious crime of that you may have committed.
I don't want to forget the criminals.
No, I'm saying I think almost everybody agrees, of course, that should happen. But if someone else, so we won't deal with hypotheticals, if other people have a concern, they have fear, they have a question.
We have a good question.
Do they call you?
They can call our office. They can access our website. We have actually put resources on our website. We have, of course, promoted things on social media because we know that's where a lot of folks are. We're also connecting with community-based organizations in certain populations that have more trusted relationships to tell folks not only are we a trusted authority when it comes to their rights and what they are, and that our job is to enforce them lawfully. But one thing I do want to push on, because you said don't forget the criminals. Well, we can't forget the criminals.
I meant forget the criminals because everybody agrees that they should be deported if they've committed serious crimes.
I agree. The thing that I'm most concerned about with the rhetoric out there and the misinformation, including after that horrific attack in New Orleans, is you have folks out there suggesting that every immigrant who is here in the United States is somehow a part of some organized crime or perpetuating crimes in communities and making it a larger narrative that is just not true. Here in Massachusetts, we are holding those who are committing crimes accountable in my office, and at the same time working with federal law enforcement on proactive ways to keep our people safe. We take that priority very seriously. We can provide you a lot of tangible things, but at the end of the day, if you don't feel safe, what does it matter? So we take that order and mandate to protect our people very seriously while also not demonizing those who are immigrants.
Julie from Quincy has a question about driver's licenses. She says she wants to know, what about the driver's licenses given to immigrants? Will their info be shared with ICE? This is a very worrisome situation, says Julie from Quincy.
Undocumented people we're talking about.
Yeah, Julie, thank you for the question. It's actually something we worked on when we were promulgating the regulations with advocates so that information would not be shared unless it was under very limited circumstances where we got a warrant or certain paperwork from a federal agency related to some crime, for example, where there was appropriate information sharing in certain circumstances. But we were mindful of this concern. We addressed it in the regulations. And we'll continue, of course, to work with the DMV and other agencies on what appropriate information sharing is and looks like.
Okay, one last question that is clearly not a hypothetical, and then we'll get to more callers and people at the mic here. Needham is voting today to see if they will comply with the law. I'm going to ask you the exact same question I asked you months ago before the Supreme Judicial Court ruled in your favor and said you do have the power to enforce this law. Yes. If you have the power to enforce this law and it is mandatory, which it is, why are people permitted to vote? I'll give you the same analogy I gave you last time.
Yep, I remember.
To me, this is analogous to saying they're going to vote in Needham as to whether or not it's going to be legal to break into stores and steal stuff. Well, they don't have to do that because that's already the law. The law, the MBTA Communities Act, says you have to do this. So why do they even get to vote?
I'm not even going to go down that path because we've talked about it before.
Okay.
But what I will stress is this recent decision from the SJC is a major victory for my office, the team, the advocates, the communities that have come into compliance with the MBTA communities law. Makes it clear that that law is mandatory. It also makes it clear that my office has the authority to enforce it. And I'm hopeful that Needham and other communities that are currently out of compliance will read that decision carefully. We'll work with our office as we provide technical assistance to municipalities to come into compliance. And that's my expectation. So we'll see what happens later today.
Has the governor issued promulgated the regulations?
They're working on it. It could come as early as later today.
And she says they'll be immediately effective, meaning once they're promulgated. This is the part of the SJC decision.
Where
they ruled for you on that, but they said you have to redo the regulations.
That's right. So EOHLC, Housing Livable Communities, they're redoing the regulations. They could come out as early as later today. And in those regulations, they will set a timeline of compliance for communities. So this will give communities even more time. I don't know what that timeline is. That has to be set by the agency. But that's a good thing. But let's be clear. The number one issue that people are talking about is affordability. Everything's too expensive. And let's remind folks, it is housing. Number one issue. And we know that the MBTA communities law is just one tool to help address that crisis. And I hope municipalities don't take their sight off of that. This is a solution to a crisis. We don't want to lose more people who will leave Massachusetts, or I think this is a veteran who's at the mic, veterans who can't afford housing, elders who can't downsize in their community, public servants the same. So I hope municipalities will do everything they can, as we have been, and work with us to get it done.
So for my birthday in May, you'll tell me why people are allowed to vote on a law that's mandatory?
Maybe not.
Okay, are you Jerry? Jerry, can we turn on the mic in the library, please?
Yes, I am Jerry.
Hi, Jerry. The Attorney General is here to listen to you.
First, I wanted to start by applauding your recent audit of the Early Education and Care Department, which was revealed that they weren't following their own regulations. I'd like to bring to your attention, my son is a person with developmental disabilities, and he's been served since he was 21, ahead of 22, and he's now 52. And in the last 5 years, we've seen numerous instances where the department doesn't follow its own regulations. I'll give you some bullet statements rather than go into the detail, but I'll leave you with the detail.
Okay.
Regarding financial mismanagement of the offsets to charges for care, it's a direct violation of Regulation 115 CMR 3.0.
Jerry, can I interrupt you? I would suggest, with your permission, that the document you give to one of the Attorney General's colleagues, but what's your question for the Attorney General?
I'd like her to audit the same agency, because I'll just give you the simple headings: financial mismanagement, insurance fraud, misrepresentation of regulations.
Wow.
And the misrepresentation was a case where my son had been sexually abused in one program, raped in another. We had protective language in there. It stayed there for 12 years, and because they redid the ISP, it accidentally fell out. I tried to get it put back in, and the regional lawyer said, our regulations preclude this. I proved to them that was not the case. I got silenced. I went to the attorney's boss. She cited the anti-discrimination laws of the Commonwealth.
I don't want this to get lost in this quick conversation. Is it okay if he hands this?
Absolutely. One, Jerry, first of all, thank you for sharing something that is so vulnerable. I appreciate that. I can imagine the ordeal your family went through based on just a simple facts you just shared, so I'm sorry for that. Second, I assumed you were a veteran based on your hat. You are a veteran. Okay.
Veteran and retiree of 34 years.
Well, thank you for your service. And then lastly, I will meet you right over here off to the side when we wrap up to make sure we have your contact details and make sure we follow up and to take your document.
I just want to add one.
No problem. Yep.
That lawyer, I pointed out to her that sexual predators are not a protected group, and that the law itself precludes individuals with mental disabilities.
Jerry, thank you for stating your case.
I'll talk to you afterwards.
The Attorney General will talk to you. 877-301-8970.
Yeah, we have a question for the Attorney General, speaking of housing. This is from Jay in Chestnut Hill. Is it legal for alleged realtors and investors to text people asking if they're looking to sell their house? I've gotten several predatory cold texts intended for my elderly parents. Thank you.
Not necessarily. So, but it sounds like someone is reaching out to Jay and saying,
And
"I
their
want to buy
parents,
your
too.
house."
Yeah.
And there's ways in which, through various technologies, to block some of that. But if it's incessant and he's worried more about his parents, he can follow up. We have an elder justice unit in the office we establish that responds to some of these.
How does he get in
complaints.
touch with them?
He can either. How did he contact you? Is that a
He
text?
texted, yep.
Okay,
texted.
so if he wants to just call 617-727-8400.
Okay.
And then just reference, he texted into the AG's office what it is, and he can be connected to our Elder Justice Unit, which is run by Mary and the team, and go from there.
And tell them that the Attorney General said that you should do that, by the way.
617
Absolutely, Jay, yes.
727-8400.
That's right.
Okay.
And just so people
sorry.
know, that's our general consumer hotline, so you can call with anything to that hotline.
Dave in Hanover, you're on with the Attorney General, Andrea Joy Campbell. Welcome.
Thank you. Hello, Attorney General. Thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you, Dave.
I have a family member who was recently suspended by Lyft after receiving a bad review. He had done like 1,600 rides this year, had a top rating.
Wow.
And there's no real appeal process. They send you an email in the morning saying you've been suspended. They give you an opportunity to send an email back, and within hours, he was permanently deleted.
Okay.
I heard on the promo for the show this morning, you were speaking about this topic.
Yes.
And you said it was one of the key things in your settlement with Uber and Lyft. And I'm wondering if you could just elaborate on that and maybe steer me in the right direction to see what kind of recourse there might be. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dave. So if your relative could follow up, he can call the same, he could either go online to file an actual complaint, or he can just call 617-727-8400 and reference this radio program, and particularly Lyft, and be connected to the appropriate team member. Yes, that was the number one issue that we heard from drivers, is that if they had great records, they could be deactivated without any reason. And so in the settlement, we required Uber and Lyft to not only provide actual notification and rationale as to why they were being deactivated, but also an appeal process. And we've heard from a few drivers that may not, that process either is not happening or they are not going through it. So if he could follow up, we can connect with him and go from there.
Dave, good luck to you. You know,
Thank you,
when
Dave.
Jerry was speaking, he talked about an audit of the department that he thinks is not treating his son responsibly and fairly. The auditor of the Commonwealth, Diana DiZoglio, championed a ballot question, which we were talking about, which won a mere 72% support from the electorate. You said to us and others, after you said it complied with, I think, Article 48 of the Constitution, so it could be on the ballot, there still may be other constitutional issues. She has said to the legislative leaders, I'm ready to go. Here are some of the areas: non-disclosure agreements, procurement policies, that sort of thing. You continue to say there still may be constitutional issues. Why don't you say what your concerns are so that the auditor and the 72% who voted for this are on notice of what may be at risk, what she can do according to you, and what she can't do according to you?
So it's a great question. So number one is fully support the value statement and what the auditor is saying. We need a legislature that is more transparent, more open, all the things she has described. Absolutely agree. We think about the public records law, what agencies and branches of government are exempt from that. That has to change.
Would you support?
I agree with
the
that.
governor said she would support, with certain exceptions, the elimination of the exemption of public. We're the only state in the country, every branch of government says it's exempt. Would you support ending the exemptions?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And I've been on the record for years related to that.
I'm sorry.
So I fully agree with that. I agree with the voters. The challenge and what has been difficult, and actually I would say frustrating at moments, and I'll say this in a loving way to my sister in service, the auditor, that we have process. So I can't, for example, initiate a lawsuit because you sent me something via social media or press release. So when we finally got the letter from the auditor requesting that we get involved, at that
Representing her.
Yeah. We said we could not because there was no legal dispute at issue. At that time, it was a back and forth between the legislature, which is still ongoing, and her waiting to get a response from both branches of government in terms of what they would respond with, and also the details of what she wanted her audit to be. That wasn't crystal clear. We have a process. Since then, she has sent us a letter. We are reviewing that. And at the same time, we have to have conversations with the legislature to figure out, well, what is it they want to send? Why I say that is because we have a process to determine when we represent an agency. We do the same for the governor or anybody else. Sometimes we say yes, sometimes we say no, depending on a process and evaluation. That I will come back once we are there. The other thing I want to stress is before the ballot question, which I fully supported.
Did you vote for it?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Okay.
But before the ballot question conversation, obviously she was looking to audit the legislature. And in that request was very expansive. And in my response to her, I said, you cannot do that based on our Constitution. If it was just financial records or something limited, yes. But based on the history of laws and legislative history, you name it, we laid it out in that long letter, you do not have the ability to go much farther than that. So what we're looking at now is what is it the auditor wants specifically from the legislature? How are they going to respond? Once that is finalized and there is a dispute, we then have to do an analysis on who we will represent. And I will say we are going to do that thoughtfully, because it is not the norm that you have one branch of government suing another branch of government. So just like we were thoughtful when we put that letter out, and I told the auditor, my sister in service, it is not personal. When I denied that request initially, some folks weren't happy about it. And it's because whether I like it or not, my job is to enforce the laws as they exist. There are some laws I'd like to change.
Okay, so you just said a minute ago, there's certain things that you may choose to audit that are not constitutionally permissible. There's certain things you may choose to that are permissible. Two things that she's mentioned in this letter to the legislature is looking at non-disclosure agreements and procurement policies. Are they permissible under the Constitution?
I'm not going to go into detail because that's a part of our current analysis based on exactly what she wants and exactly what the Senate and the House is willing to respond with. I have not been in the weeds. I think the Senate just sent out a correspondence or something maybe today or last night that they would be willing to maybe comply. I have no idea what comply with what and comply with releasing what. That's where we are. And I'm going to just stress this because it is on social media. It is out in the world. And there is some misinformation around it. And I am somehow in the center of it. And I want to be crystal clear. I am for transparency in government. Our office operates as such, and we promote and want greater transparency in our legislature and other parts of government, hence why I think certain laws should be changed. But my job is to enforce the laws as they exist and to only get involved when there is actually a legal dispute. When we are there and we have an opportunity to go through a process, we will make a decision. And we will do that thoughtfully.
But you know what's weird to me is say the cops do something bad and someone gets hurt and there's a lawsuit and they have to pay, the city of Boston has to pay $1 million. When we find out about that, they're doing these non-disclosures up at the State House, and DiZoglio was involved in one when she was working there as an aide, and paying off who knows whom for who knows what, with taxpayer dollars. So I don't understand, especially since there were no non-disclosures when the Constitution was written, I don't understand really why they're entitled to do that with taxpayer dollars and nobody knows about it.
Well, we have divisions in our office, including our false claims division, where their entire portfolio of work in many ways is to shepherd and steward taxpayer dollars.
Right.
Is to hold companies accountable that take our money and don't deliver the product and service to us as they describe, or to look at our own agencies, the same thing. We do that work. These are apples and oranges as far as I'm concerned. My position on non-disclosures and transparency is very different on whether or not right now as I stand here, there is a legal dispute between two branches of government that is right for me to get involved with. I have a request that we have to review, but let me tell you, I had requests before then that didn't necessarily come to our office, came to others, where it was not right for lawsuit at that time, because either the law hadn't gone into effect yet, there wasn't a dispute, we hadn't actually heard what the response was from the legislature. So while I may be put in the middle by some, we take our job seriously. I take my job seriously. You know, I say we because it's my team too. And that when appropriate, we will get involved where necessary, and when appropriate to get involved.
Let's go to Brian, who's at the mic at the library as well. Brian, welcome
Hi,
to
Brian.
the show.
Hi, thank you.
Hi, Brian.
So it's no surprise, but the Trump and the Republicans in Congress are heavily supported by the oil and gas industry. There's probably going to be a lot of executive orders about that day one, supporting that and furthering the development of it. How do we go about, getting a moratorium or stopping the development of natural gas infrastructure in the support of the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission in doing that in our state and supporting the cities and towns that want to go all electric? Because that electric is our future here in Massachusetts. So how do we support and stop the development of gas infrastructure?
Thank you, Brian, for the question. You're exactly right. We're gearing up for a whole host of executive orders that will likely not necessarily go with the way in which we want to proceed on a whole bunch of issues, including environmental issues. We are, obviously, various municipalities are doing things at the local level in response to your question. Where we see our role is to, one, work with other AGs across the country on the goals that you described. And we're prepared and gearing up to respond to any executive order that comes from the administration that would stand in the way for some of our climate goals. So that's number one. We don't know what's going to come just yet, but we shall see. The second is we have to work with the administration on some of this, right? It is a transition, whether to even all electricity. And it also will cost people, including ratepayers, some who may not even be paying attention to these issues more than others. So making sure these costs are reasonable, this transition is reasonable and fair. We have a whole division that is tackling this issue as we speak. Hopefully, working towards the goal that you just described, but doing it in a way that folks can afford it. It is our long-term goal, as you described, but it is still work that we have to do. I have no idea what the Trump administration is going to do, but we're prepared. If it may be a legislative solution working with the governor in the next few years, it may be a litigation solution working with our AGs across the country. It may be some local municipality continued support and work around things within their communities. It's a whole host of solutions we look to address, and we're ready. We share the same goals. Our biggest concern is as we make this transition, that it's not on the backs of ratepayers and consumers.
Thank you for your question. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Brian, and thank you for being here.
Before we take a break, you talked about transparency. I want to talk about what I consider to be lack of transparency. You told us months ago.
You just seem upset today.
I am upset today. Not with you, the state of the world, or whatever.
Yeah. He's upset a lot.
Okay, Marjorie, that's between us. Now, Attorney General, you told us months and months ago you supported a ban on third-party energy suppliers. Subsequently, the governor has said she supports it. The mayor supports it, Mayor Boston. Hundreds of organizations support it. It didn't become law. And apparently, in brilliant reporting, I should say, by the Boston Globe, and one of the people doing the reporting, Samantha Gross, will be with us tomorrow, it turns out that the chair of the House committee who is engaged in this, whose committee stopped it from becoming law, has been in a multi-year relationship with a lobbyist, one of whose clients is one of the largest third-party energy suppliers in the country, who actively opposed this law. Their contention, Representative Jeff Roy, is I'm fully compliant with law. I filed with the House clerk a statement in July of 2023 disclosing he was in a relationship with a lobbyist. His ex-wife says that happened long before that, and had the Globe not investigated, wouldn't have known about that. What's your reaction to this lead person helping to kill a proposal all three of you and others supported when he's in a relationship with one of the chief lobbyists for the other side?
Well, I don't want to speak to Chairman Roy's relationships or whatever else, or what informed what he did or didn't do. What I know and what my priority is to continue to get out here, including in this new legislative session, to get a bill passed in the legislature that would end the individual residential competitive electric supply market. And talk about, to Brian's point, we want to move towards that electricity. At the same time, we have an industry that is preying upon, and in many ways using deceptive marketing tactics, preying upon households, usually low-income households, even certain communities, for their products that are not saving them any money. We're going to be releasing another report very soon through the same ratepayer division looking at more substantial losses for folks who are relying on the competitive electric supply market. And if they actually stayed with basics, their basic ratepayer, they would have saved money, which is unfortunate. And so this report will speak to more losses. And of course, these losses are in the millions, and they're not going to slow down. And so while we can hold them accountable by filing lawsuits, what we have found, and even when we, I put this in quotes, win, they can file for bankruptcy, and these households are left, of course, with no restitution, no protection. We need a legislative fix. And we think this fix is reasonable. It doesn't take away their commercial clients or even some other possibilities of them serving certain types of institutions when it's bulk purchasing. But when it comes to these individual residential communities, mainly low-income communities, rural communities, poor communities, people of color living in certain communities, this legislative fix needs to happen. That's my position. I don't know why people do the things they do in the state house.
Let me put it another way, if I can. If you don't
I'm not going to speak to that.
Well, okay, I'm not asking you to speak to the motivation.
But can I just end with this?
No, are you, in a second, if you may, are you comfortable with the key decision maker on this issue having a relationship with one of the key lobbyists for the opposition? Isn't that at least an appearance of a problem to the taxpayers of Massachusetts and to you?
You can share that opinion. It's not about my comfortability. Am I comfortable in my job? I love my job.
You comfortable with that?
No, what I'm uncomfortable by is we are pushing for a legislative solution, and if we don't get it, we know more communities will suffer millions of losses.
Right, but you're not going to get it.
Well, I hope that people mobilize then and push their legislature, push their representatives to do what's right. I know I am. I'm showing up at the State House personally. I'm advocating. I'm pushing. We want folks who are losing these millions of dollars to also push.
Okay, last one. Last hypothetical, and then we'll take a break.
I know, because they're so upset.
People should recuse themselves.
Exactly. Should they not forget this guy?
As legislators
should
recuse themselves from areas
How
in which
about
they
that
have
question?
Financial.
I do think if you lack some objectivity in terms, and you have significant relationship of some sort that it would interfere with your ability to make a judgment that is objective, you should consider recusing yourself. Yes,
Fine.
I would have to do the same thing based on any relationships I have. And actually, sometimes I don't, because I know even if a donor or someone supports me, and I will call that donor and say respectfully, love ya, but we're still suing you because I'm not accountable to donors. I'm accountable to the people that put me here. And so sometimes we need the people to remind the people that are in these elected positions who put them there. So I'm here not to go into what he did and all that. Chairman Roy and I have done some other great work together, and I want to acknowledge that, including on wrongful convictions. We're talking about some meaningful reform
girlfriend
there.
Wasn't lobbying on the other side of that.
Okay, God bless you. My biggest thing is just to make sure they know the facts, which is why this piece of legislation will continue to be a priority for our office, because if we don't fix it legislatively, literally as we stand here and going into this winter season, millions of constituents here in Massachusetts are losing millions of dollars to an industry that if we don't hold them accountable, nobody will.
You're a better person than I, but everybody
I
knows
pray
that.
a lot.
Everybody knows that already. We got to take a break.
Well, this is another opportunity for citizens to complain about this because clearly this representative should not be voting on something that impacts him as directly as this does.
And I will just add, it's important to know, and I've said this to the folks during hearings, these folks who are running the competitive electric supply industry, these companies, we're not saying your existing customers or those who are doing well or even past, keep all that. This bill says we're banning your ability to bring in new customers because we know you are not saving them. So we have been reasonable and responsive, and we're not banning their commercial market because that's going exceptionally well. But poor people who are already struggling, elders, folks in our rural communities, what about them? And so we're going to keep fighting for them. And I would often say the people that are often left out and forgotten.
We're going to take a break.
going to take a break. But how come you moved to Dartmouth? You left us and moved down to the South Coast, as they call it, between the two gateway cities of Fall River and New Bedford.
And New Bedford.
My old neighborhood. So how come you moved down there?
Well, I will say it was bittersweet.
Yep.
You know, I'm born and raised in Boston. My father was born and raised in Boston before me. I love Mattapan. I still have family, of course. The parents are still in Mattapan. But it was time for something different for the kids and the family. My husband's originally from Vermont. Sometimes you just try something different. And so far, it's been wonderful. We have a regional office in New Bedford. And I would say Bristol County, Fall River, New Bedford, talk about communities that feel left out and left behind.
Yeah.
And so if I can bring some attention to the sort of this geographical equity issue, I will. The boys have transitioned well to Dartmouth Public Schools, and that has been amazing. It's not easy moving a family and a lot of stuff, mostly my husband's stuff. He carries a lot of stuff. But it was bittersweet, but it's amazing. And it has just been, people have been so welcoming, so warm, especially our neighbors, and it means the world.
So you obviously know a lot about Dartmouth. Here's a quick question for you before the break. What is the name?
I don't necessarily know a lot.
What is
I'm learning.
the name of the public figure who received an honorary degree from UMass Dartmouth Law School, and a week after she got it, the law school closed?
That is a good question. Who, Jim?
That'd be Marjorie Aiken.
That's
That'd
right.
be Marjorie Aiken.
And you know what? This is good because it brought some joy from Jim.
That's right.
You know, we have to remind you the sun is shining today.
shining.
We have
Okay,
our health.
fine.
We have our
Okay, fine.
family. All is going to be
No, that's
okay.
my claim to fame. I was the death knell down there at UMass Dartmouth Law School. Okay, we're talking to the Attorney General of the Commonwealth. She's going to be with us till the top of the hour. We'll get in as many questions and texts as we can. 877-301-8970. You're listening to Boston Public Radio live from the Boston Public Library.
So Jim's upset.
As his presidential term comes to an end, President Biden speaks to the nation from the Oval Office for the last time.
I want to lay out what we've done, the opportunities we've created for America, and those opportunities going forward.
From the legacy he leaves behind to the challenges ahead.
This is what we're heading into. And over the next administration, that's what we're handing it to.
It's Biden's farewell address. Listen tomorrow night at 8 here on GBH 89.7 or online at gbhnews.org.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And McLean Middleton. For over 100 years, McLean Middleton has been dedicated to serving its clients and its community, offering guidance through the complexities of today's legal system, with locations in Woburn and Boston. McLean.com. And Beacon Circle patrons Anne and Ralph Sheridan, in memory of Richard Silverman, a dedicated volunteer, a generous donor, and a friend to all at GBH.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy, Marjorie Egan, live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We're joined for the rest of the hour and the first part of the hour by the Attorney General for her monthly Ask the AG. If you have a question, you can call 877-301-8970, text, or show up at the mic and talk to Hannah, as a couple of you have already done.
So, Attorney General Campbell, I thought that insulin was capped. I thought it was capped locally by the legislature costs and by Biden's prescription drug thing, $25 for certain name brand medications. But what is going on?
I'm yelling because I see my Uncle Benji. I'm like, what are you doing out here?
You are Uncle?
There's Uncle Benji.
So don't put a camera on
Let's
him.
hear it for Uncle Benji right here.
He just walked in. I'm like, hey.
Wants to see you in action.
I know. I digress. No, this is a major case. So while there was, of course, even at the federal level, some capping, it doesn't involve every company. It doesn't involve every brand of drug. So this is still a major consumer protection case, and it is significant because I talked about housing earlier, but affordability, rising costs is a number one issue. That's why the president-elect, if he's going to help work with us on bringing down cost, I'll be there with him. If he's not, then we're going to be somewhere else doing this work. And my concern is that, frankly, we're going to have to step in even more to hold companies accountable on the consumer protection front, because I think the federal government's going to walk away. So this lawsuit looks at these pharmacy benefit managers who are working with the manufacturers in this sort of pay-to-play to position their products on the list and, frankly, to raise costs for those who have diabetes or even those who are pre-diabetic. And we're talking about millions of residents here in Massachusetts. And at some point years ago, the cost of insulin, we were getting the numbers, at some point was maybe $2. And then skyrocketed. It's currently priced between $300 to $700. And that's not by accident, right? That the consumers are seeing this increase in cost, so much so that some are saying, I'm not even going to take my medication because I can't afford it. So this lawsuit, which also is done in other states have also done this, is looking to hold these PBMs as well as these manufacturers accountable for how they're coordinating to be able to manipulate prices and, most importantly, to increase them to the harm of those suffering from diabetes, sadly.
Pharmacy benefit managers?
PBMs.
Okay. Paul and Braintree, you're on with the Attorney General. I'm sorry, Marty, you about to say something?
We have a good text about homeowners
Paul,
insurance.
can you hold just 1 second?
Yeah,
and we'll get to you, I promise.
This is an anonymous texter who wants to know anything is done about the skyrocketing homeowners insurance affecting all homeowners in Massachusetts. Some of this person's friends, their bills have doubled. Is there any movement to apply something similar to a Proposition 2.5 to insurance companies that operate in the Commonwealth? I think this is just going to get
No
worse and worse
current
and
movement
worse.
on that legislative solution. Something could be explored. I think it's a reminder, the AG's office, my office and I and the team play a role as a ratepayer for utility costs, auto insurance rates, all types of insurance rates. And when these proposals come in, we are inserting ourselves to make sure they're reasonable, given, yes, companies have to sometimes respond to inflation and other things that are raising their costs.
Well, the climate disasters all over the country, I think that, fortunately, is going to keep happening because,
I
like all
understand
states,
that.
they're covering the floods, they're covering the hurricanes, they're covering the fires.
So I understand that, but at the end of the day, our job is to make sure they're still reasonable in terms of these increases. What we have found to be useful is folks that are experiencing an increase, even reaching out to the office on their particular case where we might be able to be helpful. I know this person was anonymous, but I would just say to folks who are experiencing an increase in cost by different types of companies, don't hesitate to reach out to our office because we might be able to help in ways they don't know yet.
By the way, the Hegseth hearing is just adjourning. I believe that the person sitting over his right shoulder throughout the whole hearing was his mother, who said he was the worst person who ever lived until he wasn't. We'll confirm that for you in a second.
We made a mistake.
What's that?
About the place I got the honorary degree.
You didn't get it from UMass Dartmouth?
Apparently not. It was Southeastern School of Law.
They closed down when you got it too?
I guess they closed down too.
Oh, they closed down too? Okay. Paul.
No, UMass Dartmouth did not.
Whatever.
So it shut down. Southeastern
No,
School.
that's still very much open.
Yeah, that's right.
I just
all
left
the way your new house is.
I just left it alone because Jim was just so upset.
Such a bad mood, yeah.
Southeastern
Thank
School
you.
of Law. That's what I shut down.
Facts be
I
damned.
didn't mean to.
Paul and Braintree, you are next. You're on with the Attorney General. Thanks for your patience.
Hi, Jim,
Welcome.
Marjorie.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi.
Paul.
Hello. Hi.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Speak.
Go ahead.
Paul. We'll put Paul on hold.
What happened to
877.
Paul?
I don't know.
He
We just
disappeared.
lost him. We'll try him again in a second.
Sorry,
We're going to
Paul.
Jay in a car. Jay, welcome.
Hi there. I'm actually in Dartmouth now.
Are you in front of the Attorney General's house down there? Checking it out?
Please don't encourage that.
Go ahead. That's a good point. Go ahead, Jay.
Sorry. Okay, sorry.
Yeah. I'm calling specifically with a question regarding MCAD, the Massachusetts Commission Against Discrimination.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was in the spring, Lawyers for Civil Rights and the Urban League of Eastern Massachusetts basically wrote a demand letter threatening a class action suit against MCAD for how backlogged it is. And MCAD said it was going to catch up, and they made a lot of promises again. And I mean, I myself, without getting specific, have a complaint pending with MCAD. It's been 14 months, and you know, from what I've read online, because of the way that they're operating, it can take 5, 6 years, 10 years for anything to even make its way through to a decision.
Jay, I actually appreciate the call. That is an important agency. It is the agency that people go to when they experience discrimination, can file, of course, a complaint, and seek to get some accountability and justice for those who can't afford a lawyer. And so that backlog is real. This is something, of course, that the administration would have to work on. I will say, when I worked as a lawyer for Governor Deval Patrick, was involved with some push to try to address the backlog, even revamping who was appointed to the MCAT to make it such that you had really experienced people there. it still needs reform. We actually get cases from the MCAT. We have there is mandated referrals that come to our office, especially in the housing context. When it comes to discrimination, we are taking those cases all the time and making sure we have enough attorneys, including, for example, in our Civil Rights Division, to handle these cases. And we are doing our part. This is something that I, of course, would be delighted to work with the administration on, but reforms are still needed when it comes to the MCAT and the backlog. More investment, probably more human capital to address the backlog there. I agree.
Jay, thank you much for your call.
And it probably requires not only an administrative fix, but also maybe a legislative solution too. Who knows? But it definitely requires something to address the backlog.
Attorney General, the Globe did, I thought, rather extraordinary reporting on the oversight or lack of oversight by predecessor attorneys general and Governor Healy and Baker around the Stewart situation. When the governor was here last week, Marjorie asked her about it, and she said what she said to the Globe, but she thought the reporting was inaccurate, unfair, that she had done a thorough, I'm paraphrasing, but essentially a thorough job. Is there, and I asked her at the end, the Globe editorial board would said there should be an independent investigator look into this so we find out where the blame lay, if, in addition to obviously people like De La Torre and the people at Stewart. Is there a potential role for you in this? Should there be an independent investigation? Should the Attorney General's office look into how the Stewart mess happened and if the failure of some people in government to do their job was part of it? What's your role in this?
So we are actively still looking at Stewart. Obviously, that has not gone away. We are still, and I can't speak to the weeds or be in the weeds of an open investigation, but I've been on the record before when it was unfolding, talking about we will do our part to hold them accountable. That is ongoing. And then the second solution was a legislative solution, giving the office more tools to look at these transactions when they are happening, not after the fact. If I have to give the governor any credit, it is that some of those tools did not exist until maybe last week when the legislature passed a bill in terms of private equity when it comes to private equity in our healthcare system, like a Stewart, and of course she signed it. That gives us in the HPC significant tools to be able, for example, to look at a transaction as it is happening where you say, I want to sell the property of the hospital from underneath the hospital itself and give it to a private company that can increase the rents to some exorbitant rate and then charge the hospital back.
Which is what happened at Stewart.
Exactly.
And the legislature precluded that going forward.
So I will just say, now that we have these additional tools, it allows for that, along with our accountability analysis, which is still ongoing.
Does accountability include elected officials or just the Stewart side of the equation?
The accountability is accountability. I can't speak anymore because it's open.
Okay. Paul and Braintree, you're back, I'm told. Welcome to the show. Thanks for sticking to it. Hi.
I am back. Thank you very much.
Sure.
During the recent Medicare enrollment review period, I called one of those incessant phone numbers and to check on my current Medicare position. It was a company called SelectQuote. They only gave me one option, which turned out to be Aetna. I asked them to send me or email me some information. Next thing I know, I'm getting tons of information that I've already been switched to Aetna without my approval. I had to go back to my original company. Oh, it was high. It was really high pressure. Well, why can't you make a decision today? Exact quote from the person I had from SelectQuote. They didn't give me an option other than Aetna. It made me feel they were working only for this one company, Aetna, and I had no other option.
Paul,
is this something within your purview?
Well, actually, yes. We will find out once we want to sort of have more details, who you talked to, when, and what was involved. But can you stay on, Paul, so we can get your contact information to follow up with you?
We'll do that.
Please stay on. Terrific. We'll certainly follow up with you.
We'll give your contact information. Please stay on. A producer will take it and give it to somebody in the Attorney General's office. You wrote Walmart after Walmart joined the growing list, sadly, at least in my opinion, and apparently yours, of major corporations that cared about DEI after George Floyd was killed and don't apparently care about it anymore because I'm guessing because they're scared of Donald Trump. Tell us what you did and how we know Costco is a holdout, but for the most part, there's either silence or retreat. How concerned are you about this?
Well, one, we should celebrate a Costco, and we should celebrate other companies that are leaning into DEI initiatives, not doing away with their initiatives, but supporting them because Costco and others get it, which is, and they're doing it against probably some fear and anxiety because of what's going to come from the federal administration. And they're doing it understanding the legal landscape as we do, which is no Supreme Court decision. There is nothing out there whatsoever that is standing in the way of companies promoting and utilizing and implementing DEI initiatives. And this idea that DEI is causing harm is such nonsense. It's BS. And I'm going to be crystal clear on it because there are some that maybe even suggest that I'm AG because I'm the DEI candidate. Please. I, worked hard to get to this position, went to Princeton undergrad with, no money, no deceased parents, you name it, went to law school, worked really hard, and then worked hard to get to this position, earning the vote of supporters. So this narrative out there around DEI misinformation, Costco and others are pushing back on, and so are we as AGs across the country to say we don't need another report. DEI initiatives raise the bottom line of a corporation. Crystal clear. Many have pointed to this. Also, when you have more diverse leadership and background and lived experience around a table and forming solutions, you get better solutions, you get greater creativity. Also, this is where I think my voice is most important, you also reduce the number of discrimination complaints, all the things that would come against your company because you don't have an inclusive work environment. This also helps with those risks as well, reducing your litigation risk in terms of discrimination or other anti-civil rights complaints. So these companies that are on the forefront and being courageous should be applauded. And so our letter to Walmart was, where are you? And this is good not only for the company, it's good for consumers, it's good legally, it is the best strategy. And at this point in time, if we want to make sure the new president-elect actually addresses the increase in costs, as he says he's going to do, we have to hold him accountable. And we have to say the dismantling of DEI does not do that. Let's work together on going after companies that are increasing, for example, the price of insulin. Let's go after companies or landlords that are manipulating the price of rents, not focus on other things because of misinformation that is out there.
Okay, we're out of time. Anything you want to say to Uncle Benny?